I asked the internet for its funniest joke, and you did not disappoint. Two hunters are out hunting, and one of them keels over, so the other one calls emergency services and says, "Help! We were out hunting, and I think my buddy's dead. What do I do?" And the operator says, "Well, first, make sure he's dead." And then he hears 2 gunshots. The hunter comes back on the phone and says, "Okay, now what?" My girlfriend was perfect in every way except that her armpits were smelly. Hands down, the best girl ever. A man checks into a hotel with his wife and kids, approaches the concierge saying, "My family is with me, so I hope the naughty movies in the room are disabled." After a moment of shock, the concierge replies, "It's normal naughty movies, you sick F." 2 muffins are in the oven. One looks to the other one and asks, "Is it hot in here?" And the other one replies, "Holy crap, a talking muffin!" What does a Polish man give his wife on their wedding night that's long and hard? His last name. You have to be careful telling Polish jokes. Me and my uncle got in a pretty bad mess when I told one in McDonald's. A guy overheard it and jumped up and said that his whole family was from Poland and he'd see me outside. When we finished our meal, he was waiting on us, leaning on the hood of our car. He jerked out a razor and said, "You think it's funny now?" I thought he was going to kill us. Luckily, he couldn't find a place to plug it in. Yeah, my uncle was Polish and he'd flip his lid at Polish jokes. I remember one time he ordered a Polish sausage and the worker said, "Oh, looks like we got a Polish guy here," and my uncle lost it. He said, "Just because a guy orders a Polish sausage doesn't mean they're Polish. That kind of thinking is racist and insensitive. Why would you assume I'm Polish?" The guy just replied, "Well, sir, because this is a hardware store." 2 nuns were riding their bike to church. One of them says, "I've never come this way before." The other one replied, "I think it's the cobblestones." Oh, Lord. 2 other nuns were sitting on a park bench, and the first turns to the other and says, "Sister, every time I sneeze, I climax." Sister 2 says, "Oh my, what are you taking for it?" And Sister 1 says, "Oh, you know, pepper usually does the trick." The same 2 nuns were out driving one night when a vampire jumped on the hood of their convertible. The first nun yells to the second, "Sister, show him your cross!" So the second leans out the window and screams, "Aye, get the feck off me car!" Oh boy, I'm just kind of picturing any of the nuns from Derry Girls in this situation, and I don't know whether the pun or just visualizing that TV situation is making me laugh more. A depressed man is walking along the beach. He's miserable and can't catch a break in life. He looks out to the water in despair, when suddenly he hears a booming voice from above yell out, "Dig." The man is sure he's hallucinating, but again he hears, "Dig." So he falls to his knees and begins to dig right there in the sand. As he heaps handful after handful of sand out, suddenly he hits something solid. He traces around it and quickly realizes it's a treasure chest. The booming voice immediately yells, "Open." So the man opens the chest and reveals $1 million in cash. He can't believe his luck has turned when he suddenly hears the booming voice yell out, "Casino." As quickly as he can, he carries the chest up the dunes to the closest road and flags down the first taxi approaching. "Casino," the voice repeats. So he asks the driver to take him to the nearest casino. On arrival at the casino, the man pays the driver and the booming voice yells, "Enter." The man gets out of the taxi and walks into the casino. "Roulette," booms the voice. "Hurry." The man hurriedly approaches the nearest roulette wheel and awaits further instructions. "Red 21. The man puts the entire $1 million on red 21 and eagerly watches the croupier spin. The ball drops, landing on black 16. The booming voice yells, "Frick." An old Italian gentleman lived alone in New Jersey, and he wanted to plant his annual tomato gardens, but it was difficult work as the ground was hard. His oldest son, Vincent, who used to help him, was in prison. The old man wrote a letter to his son and described his predicament. "Dear Vincent, I'm feeling pretty sad, because it looks like I won't be able to plant my tomato garden this year. I'm just getting too old to be digging up the garden plot. I know if you were here, my troubles would be over. I know you'd be happy to dig the plot up for me like the old days. Love, Papa." A few days later, he received a letter from his son. "Dear Papa, don't dig up that garden. That's where the bodies are buried. Love, Vinny." At 4 a.m. the next morning, the FBI arrived. The local police arrived too. They dug up the entire area without finding anybody. They apologized to the old man and left. That same day, the old man received another letter from his son. Dear Papa, go ahead and plant the tomatoes now. That's the best I could do under the circumstances. Love, Vinny. 3 moles are traveling underground. The first mole says, I smell sugar. The second mole says, I smell honey. The third one says, with disgust, all I can smell is molasses. Oh, come on. Why do chicken coops have 2 doors? If they had 4 doors, there'd be chicken sedans. Oh. What's green and furry and has 4 legs, and if it falls out of a tree and lands on you, you'll die? A pool table. That reminds me of another I like. What's red and really bad for your teeth? A brick. I really want to buy one of those grocery store dividers, but the lady behind the counter keeps putting it back. A plane is being loaded. As the passengers come aboard, they're greeted by the stewardesses and 2 pilots. The pilots are wearing dark glasses and are carrying white canes. Most passengers laugh at the joke and find their way to the seats. The plane is fully loaded and taxis to the runway. As the thrusters open and the plane starts gathering speed, some more gullible passengers look out their windows and notice the runway ends at a large body of water. The speed continues to increase, as does the agitation in the cabin. We're running out of runway, yells one man. We're gonna hit the water, yells another. Panic ensues and a collective scream rises up from the passengers. At that moment, the plane miraculously lifts into the air and begins its ascent. The passengers look at each other, exchanging sheepish grins and feeble laughs. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, one pilot says to the other, You know, Frank, someday they're not gonna yell and we're all gonna die. My dad asked me the other day, Are you even listening to me? Which is a really weird way to start a conversation if you ask me. A blonde policewoman pulls over a blonde driver and asks for her license and registration. The blonde woman asks, What's a license? And the officer says, Oh, it's the little square thing in your purse with your picture on it. Oh, responds the blonde woman as she pulls out a pocket mirror. Here you go. The policewoman looks at it and says, Oh, if I'd known you were a police officer, I wouldn't have pulled you over. You're free to go. Why do they put barcodes on the sides of ships from Norway? So they can scan the navy in. A German guy tells another guy, The war was terrible. My grandfather died in a camp. The friend says, Oh my god, that's terrible. And he replies, Yeah, he fell out of a guard tower. Why are the Great Pyramids in Egypt? Because they were too big to put in the British Museum. A priest, a minister, and a rabbit walk into a blood donation center. The rabbit says, I think I'm a type O. Oh. What's a pirate's favorite letter? You might be tempted to say R, but a pirate's first love is the sea. A male cop pulls over a woman for speeding. She says, You won't believe me, but I'm rushing to the hospital because I have a magic toy stuck inside me. The instructions said to say, Magic toy, my hoo-ha, and it jumped up in me and just won't stop. The cop chuckled and said, That's a creative excuse, but magic toy, my butthole. The life skills teacher arrived in class. Good morning. Today I'm going to show you how to put on a Johnny, and I bought this banana because I can't get rigid on an empty stomach. We do have to tone down some of the language here, as usual, and I hope that not too much of the meaning is lost on everyone, but in case any of you were wondering about this last one, a Johnny is a rubber prophylactic, and by life skills, we mean that class in school where a teacher tries to seriously and non-awkwardly describe the birds and the bees to a group of moronic teenage yahoos who certainly aren't listening and who will not apply any of the lessons properly. A pirate walks into a bar with a steering wheel sticking out of his pants, asks the bartender for a rum, and she says, Okay, but you know you have a steering wheel sticking out of your pants, right? And the pirate says, Arr, it's driving me nuts. 2 black dudes are walking down the street and they see a sign that says, Become white for 99 cents. One guy has $1 and one has 98 cents. They debate if it's a scam and decide to send in the guy with $1 to try it. If it works, he can give the other guy a penny and they'll both be white and not have to put up with racism anymore. So the guy goes in and 5 minutes later he comes out and he's super white. Blonde hair and blue eyes and all of that. The other guy goes, Oh my god, it worked. Hey, give me that penny. The first guy says, Why don't you get a freaking job? I have an elderly neighbor with dementia. It's just him on his own since his wife passed a few years ago. Every morning he knocks on my door asking if I've seen his wife since he can't find her, not remembering that she's passed. So every morning I'm tasked with telling him that his wife is dead. I've thought about moving away, but it's worth it just to see the smile on his face. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? A guy wants his friend to go out drinking. He won't because he always gets too drunk and throws up on himself, and his wife gets mad about the cleanup. His buddy says, just put a 20 in your shirt pocket and tell her it's from the guy that threw up on you. When he gets home from the bar, his wife is annoyed about the throw-up, but he pulls out the money and tells her about the guy, and she says, hey, there's 2 20s in here. And he goes, yeah, can you believe it? That guy crapped my pants, too. What's the best armor for sneaking? Leather. It's made of hide. My English teacher in high school told this one. What does Santa call his elves? Subordinate clauses. I was the only one in class to laugh, and I still think it's the greatest joke ever. A blonde woman and her boyfriend go to a comedy club to see a ventriloquist. Midway through the show, the comedian starts setting his dummy up for a whole bunch of blonde jokes. The woman laughs along at first, but eventually it's too much for her to take. Hey, it was funny for a while, but that's enough. I'm a blonde and I don't like people assuming that I'm dumb. It's not fair. The comedian, taken aback, says, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying, and she cuts him off. Oh, I wasn't talking to you. I went to the zoo the other day, but there was only this one dog in it. It was a Shih Tzu. A woman is sitting at her recently deceased husband's funeral. A man leans over to her and asks, do you mind if I say a word? No, go right ahead, the woman replies. The man stands, clears his throat and says, plethora, and sits back down. Thank you, the woman says. That means a lot. Mickey Mouse was in court. The judge asks, Mr. Mouse, you wish to divorce your wife Minnie for being extremely silly? And Mickey says, no, I said she was effing goofy. What do you give the man who has everything? Antibiotics. Did you hear the one about the sewer worker who died in the line of duty? I told my wife she was drawing her eyebrows too high. She looked surprised. What's Whitney Houston's favorite type of coordination? Oh boy. And Sorry about that. Driver asked, window or aisle? Window or you'll what, mate? And I chinned him right there. What's brown and sounds like a bell? Dung. Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. My bicycle can't stand up because it's too tired. This one's a true story told by my dad. Many years ago, my dad was working on a road crew in Regina, Saskatchewan. It was payday Friday and they were all down at the local tavern. A bar floozy had been propositioning many men looking for a warm bed for the night, and she just wasn't having any luck. Last call went around, the lights went up, and the floozy was running around looking like she was trying to catch an insect. She leapt up in the air and slapped her hands together like she'd caught something. She peeked into her clasped hands and said, if any of you can guess what I have in here, you can take me home and have your way with me. Someone in the back of the room yelled out, a water buffalo! And she peeked back into her hands and said, close enough. Why do scuba divers fall backwards out of boats? Because if they fell forwards, they'd still be in the boat. One afternoon, a frog hops onto a bank. Seeing a bank teller's name tag, the frog says, hi, Mrs. Whack. I'd like to take out a loan to renovate my lily pad. Mrs. Whack is confused because it's a talking frog asking for a loan. Trying to be polite, Mrs. Whack says, please, call me Patty. What's your name? What's your background? The frog responds, my name is Kermit, and you may not believe this, but my father is Mick Jagger. Mrs. Whack says, well, I suppose Jagger has a froggy face, so I guess I see the family resemblance. Even though your father is rich, you're going to need some collateral for the loan. Kermit takes out a little pink elephant figurine and asks, is this good enough for collateral? Puzzled, Mrs. Whack replies, I have no idea. Let me check with my manager. Sure, tell him I say hello, adds the frog. He knows me. Mrs. Whack approaches the bank manager to explain the situation. There's a frog who wants to take out a loan. Apparently he's Mick Jagger's son. However, all he has for collateral is this little pink elephant. Should we give him the loan? The manager picks up the figurine, smiles and exclaims, it's a knick-knack, pattywhack. Give the frog a loan. His old man is a rolling stone. Oh god. Apparently this might be an old Norm Macdonald joke, which honestly applies to a much larger portion of these than I would have guessed when I chose the topic. Maybe we're all nostalgic for him lately. There was two fellows in a sawmill together, cousins they was. The one that owned it was named Jim. Smart Jim, people called him. He ran the saw, and Chris helped him. Now Chris, he was a careless kind of fella. Never seemed to think ahead any further than his nose. But old Chris, he was walking ambulance bait, at least if there'd been an ambulance within 30 miles. Well, one day Chris was trying to diagnose an issue with the saw blade, and he kept bumping the clutch to get it to spin whilst feeling around for the problem. Took his arm right off, halfway between the elbow and the shoulder. Thankfully, Jim was standing right there, and he was a quick thinker. Threw the arm in a black plastic trash bag and rushed him to the hospital. Went in to check on him the next day, and the arm was back on and working fine. Sore, but working. Within 6 weeks, he was back to stacking lumber in the mill and trying to play baseball on the weekends. Chris was careful for a while, but then he was up on the saw deck, kicking a frozen piece of something, and he hadn't bothered to stop the blade. He slipped and took his leg off just above the knee. It had worked before, so they threw the leg in a bag and rushed him off to get him put back together. Within 8 weeks, he was back at the mill and playing hockey whenever he got the chance. Jim kept on him, but he started getting sloppy again, and one day he did it. Nobody really knew how, but he took his head off in the mill. It looked pretty hopeless if you hadn't seen the way they'd fixed him up before, but Jim had seen it. He threw the head in a black plastic trash bag, loaded Chris up in the truck, and off they went to the hospital. After a couple of days, Jim hadn't heard nothing, so he went up to the hospital to check on Chris. Wandered around for a while and couldn't find him anywhere. Finally found a nurse and asked her about his brother. She looked at him a little cross and kind of sputtered, "Well, we coulda saved him, we coulda, but some idiot threw his head in a plastic bag and he suffocated." I want to die in my sleep like my grandpa, not like the rest of the passengers in the car screaming for him to wake up. A little boy and a clown are walking into the woods at night. The little boy looks up at the clown and says, "Gee, Mr. Clown, those woods sure are dark and scary." The clown looks down at the little boy, tussles his hair and says, "Oh, it sure is, but think about it from my perspective. I have to walk back alone." What does a robot do after he's done the deed? He nuts and bolts. A man with dyslexia walks into a bra. Two deer walk out of a gay bar. One of them turns to the other and says, "Man, I can't believe I blew $20 in there." I had a friend pass away because I didn't know what blood type he was. As he was dying, he kept me happy by telling me to be positive. What should you do if you're attacked by a group of street performers? Go straight for the jugular. Times New Roman and Lucinda Calligraphy go into a bar. The barman says, "Sorry, we don't serve your type here." Mike is on a long trip and stops for a drink at this one bar. After a while, someone runs in and says, "Run for your lives! Big Jake's coming!" The bar clears out in a hurry, except for our protagonist who has no idea what's going on. Suddenly, this big bear of a man kicks down the door, kicks tables and chairs out of the way, and walks straight into the bar. He grabs Mike's beer and chugs it in one big gulp and slams the glass down on the counter. Scared for his life, Mike stammers, "Can I get you another, sir?" "Oh, I ain't got time. Didn't you hear? Big Jake's coming." A pianist with Tourette's sees a "now hiring" ad on the side of a nightclub. He goes in and asks the owner if he can audition. The owner sits at a table and listens as the pianist plays an upbeat tune with a lot of skill. When he's done playing, the owner says, "That was great. What do you call it?" "That was, I poop and pee on every girl I date." "Oh, what? Geez, play something else." The pianist plays a slow piece that's the most beautiful music the owner has ever heard. Again, when he's finished, he asks the pianist what he calls that one. "That was, I effed your mother in the butt last night." The owner is once again taken aback and says, "Look, you can play. I'd love to hear you in my club. The only thing is I can't have you talking to my guests like that, so if you play here, you can't talk." The pianist agrees. On his first night, he's playing to a full crowd. At a front table, there's a woman sitting alone. She's gorgeous, with ample cleave and a slit on her dress up to mid-thigh. She's really getting the pianist's engine going. At the intermission, he goes into the bathroom and cranks one out because he's so enamored by the woman in the audience. He then goes to the bar to have a drink. The woman walks up to him and catches his eye. He says hello to her, and she responds, "Do you know you have a raging stiff one and splooge on your shoes?" And the pianist responds, "Know it, I frickin' wrote it." Two peanuts were walking down the street in a tough neighborhood. One was assaulted. I just bought a new thesaurus. Not only is it terrible, but it's also terrible. The hidden struggle of unwanted parenthood. What it's really like to regret having kids. I've spoken with a woman who feels nothing towards her kids. She had them because that's what the church requires, and her husband wanted them. But I don't think it's just the kids. Even though she says she loves her husband, I don't think that's what she feels for him. She was picked on severely growing up, and he's really good to her. I think it's thankfulness that she feels and confuses it with love. Anyway, she knows that it's wrong, that's in her words by the way, to not love her kids, and decided to view parenting as a project with the best possible outcome being to have her children grow into healthy, happy, and well-adjusted adults. She did clarify that she doesn't hate them or resent them. After all, they were a part of her life plan, right? So, she made up a way following all of the best parenting advice and making sure she follows through. For example, she keeps track of how often she cuddles them, by minutes noted in her journal. And if she notices that she hasn't been doing it a lot, she tries to correct it. She also leaves discipline up to her husband because she doesn't want them to associate any negative feeling towards her. She knows they'll eventually be able to recognize her lack of feelings towards them and will think her discipline came from a bad place. From what she told me, she's never explained any of this to her husband, and he has no clue how she feels. This conversation lasted about 4 hours and was the moment I realized that you can choose to be a good parent or a bad one. Regardless of how you feel, it's never the child's fault, and an adult is responsible for making up what they lack. As sad as this situation is for everyone involved, this woman actually seems quite admirable. She knows that she's put herself in a bind and is also self-reflective enough to realize the consequences of her retrospectively bad choices. She still tries her best to work with them and take responsibility. You're entirely right that it's an adult's job to make a crappy situation work as best as it can, and not pin it on the kids. Sounds like she's a better parent than a lot of people who actually love their children. I don't know if I fall into that category, but sometimes I do feel I regret it. I love my kids, and I'm told I'm a pretty good dad, and sometimes I even enjoy it. But most of the time, it's just draining. I explain it's like being an introvert at a party full of strangers. It's not that caring for the kids is painful or whatnot, just like talking to strangers isn't painful. It's just draining. It sucks the energy out of you, whether you're good at it or not. At a party, my goal is that the people I talk with feel heard and cared about and have fun, and that nobody knows I'm secretly watching the clock waiting to leave. And with kids, my goal is that they're happy and engaged and feel loved and wanted and cared for, and don't think that I'm counting the seconds to bedtime. But accomplishing that drains me. I understand that there are people out there who enjoy spending time with their kids, just like there are people who enjoy talking to strangers. And suffice it to say, I'm just not one of them. So I guess I want my kids, but what I really want is for my kids to magically be old enough that they're no longer draining, and for me to get my life back a little. I mean, I love them, and I want them to be happy, and if anyone ever tried to take them from me, I would go to hell and back to prevent it. But when was the last time I took a bike ride? When was the last time I looked forward to the weekend rather than seeing it as an exhausting slog? When was the last time I went into Monday a little rested rather than just beaten down and exhausted? And as importantly, when's the next time I'll get to do so? 5 years from now? 10? Will I be young enough to even enjoy it? So I don't know if I particularly fit into the category of people with unwanted kids. Probably not. But I definitely do feel that way a lot more than I'd like sometimes. Oof, boy, as someone who feels similar to the way you describe you feel at parties, maybe this is a warning flag against kids. Then again, I know others like me who claim that their kids gave them energy they didn't have before, and who seem like great parents. I guess you really don't know until you give it a go. Oof. Good on you for being a good dad despite not always feeling 100%. Maybe when they're teens and want to spend all of their time in their rooms, you'll want the overwhelming activity back. I remember having to stop at my dad's work, and the receptionist leading me back to his office, and her just gushing about what a great guy he is, and what a diligent worker to put in so much overtime. Just listening to this woman failed to realize that she was describing an absent father, and a pretty mean one at that. This makes me think of the guy who posted about having pressured his ex into having the baby when she found out she was pregnant. And she agreed, but only if she could give up all parental rights and, at time of posting, pays more than the required child support. He wanted to know if there was any way he could legally oblige her to take care of the child again. Like, this lady got pregnant, didn't want to have a child, and agreed to carry the pregnancy to term only if she had nothing to do with the baby besides paying child support. But a year and a half later, the guy realized that being a single father was pretty hard, and wanted to know if he had any way to legally force the bio mom to physically help raise their son. I read through some of the comments, and I'm glad that the commenters just went in on him. A girl I worked with had a 5-year plan. Get a designer man, have a massive wedding, travel to fancy hotels, and have a baby. She managed all of it except the baby. 2 years of IVF later and still no baby. After a long adoption process, they got a 6-month-old. 3 months later, they give him back and divorce. She realized that she only wanted a baby because that's what people did, and that meant she was successful. She'd never thought about what having a baby meant and what it would do to her perfect life. The husband couldn't live with what she had decided, so left. At least the baby went to a couple who did want him eventually, instead of staying with her. I had genetic testing done during very early pregnancy to screen for congenital problems, and mentioned I would terminate if they were present. I had friends severely upset with me about this. I know I couldn't handle a differently abled child financially or emotionally, and I had to be honest with myself. I mean, screw anyone else who judges you about that. They're not the ones who'll be raising said child. Good for you. When my daughter was 1.5 years old, I unexpectedly got pregnant a second time. It was unexpected because I have pretty substantial infertility issues. I was not ready. I was exhausted as heck from my daughter being a typical toddler and a dog we rescued that needed constant emotional coddling. And hindsight makes it easier to see that my depression was wildly out of control. But I didn't realize it because my panic attacks weren't. I'd lay awake at night, in pain, wanting to throw up from heartburn, exhausted because my daughter decided sleeping through the night was no longer a thing, and I would think, if I lost this new one, I'd probably feel relieved, and other things along those lines. And this went on for the whole pregnancy, right up until 32 weeks when I went into labor, and I'd lost the kid. Gone for at least 3 days before I went into labor. Despite all the expected mental anguish and trauma, for just one single moment when we were driving home with empty arms and an empty seat, I felt relieved. I have yet to forgive myself for that. I was a nanny for a lady who really didn't want children but ended up having 5 because she loved her husband. Each of her pregnancies, her medical condition got worse. With her youngest, she had to be in the hospital for 2 months because she had so many kidney stones. Part of her condition is she produces kidney stones at a crazy rate, and they're rare stones that have a hook on them. Oof. Her kidneys are also more like a sponge-looking organ than a kidney, and aren't functioning over 25% capacity. She'd give her life for those kids even though she never wanted them. The crappy part, when the youngest was 2, was that her health was declining a lot, and her husband left her for a chick he'd just met because I quote, "I'm sick of you being sick. I miss those kids so much and I miss her." She got full custody and has even better insurance now that her ex left her, and he pays huge in child support and alimony every month. I was conceived to replace a baby boy that died. My mum was so disappointed I was a girl, she forgot my name for a while, and now I have 2 middle names. I had a brother growing up who was favored by both my parents, but he was really amazing. He was my favorite too. He died 5 years ago in a motorcycle wreck, and I'm the least favorite. My mum admitted this freely. So I'm the last remaining child. Also, I don't care that my parents are disappointed that I was the one that survived. I've made myself who I want to be. I only talk to my dad occasionally, and my mum became an alcoholic because I guess 2 of her kids passed away. I don't talk to her. My life is separate from theirs, and I encourage other people to cut off the cancerous people, even if it is your parents. It is liberating. I don't think my parents regretted having me, but they conceived me without learning how to make their marriage work or addressing their psychological problems, and with expectations of me taking care of them when they got old. They're both very unstable, and my childhood was riddled with hatred and mistreatment, but I still feel guilty about resenting them because I sympathize with their trauma. It's very hard to fully cut them off for that reason, despite knowing they've caused me a lot of trauma too. But moving out was a good step forward and extremely freeing. I'm glad you've made a better life for yourself without them. It's pretty inspiring. I think this is a conversation that more women, especially, should have. You're close to being burnt at the stake if you confess that actually, if you could turn back the clock, you wouldn't have children. I feel that these conversations might stop perpetuating this idea that 1, if you're a woman, you'll automatically adore your children, and 2, that you have more options than just having children. Women also go through things such as postnatal depression, and maybe others talking about it won't make them feel so guilty and alienated for it. Look, I record a lot of videos, and I've gotten pretty good at shrugging off some of the severe and grim subject matter we read about. But this video is at least giving me a minor crisis of conscience about whether I really want kids. And although I think all dads should be forced to stick around and provide financial support and time with their kids, I can't imagine how much scarier the decision is when you have pregnancy, postnatal depression, feeding, and the generally stricter legal bindings and social expectations of motherhood. I read this Reddit story once that I've never been able to forget. It was a confession. I can't remember the subreddit. Anyway, this woman had a kid she didn't want. I can't remember the circumstances of whether it was hers or a dead sibling's. Anyway, she talked about how she felt so guilty for not loving him that she worked extra hard to give him a good life. All her money went towards his education and things that he wanted. But the part I can't forget is that she had set an alarm on her phone to go off every day to remind her to tell him that she loved him, because it didn't come naturally to tell him that, and she was afraid of him not feeling loved. That story is an amazing reminder that love comes in so many forms and looks different for everyone. She doesn't love him, but is so worried about his well-being that she goes to lengths many people with kids would never consider going to make him feel wanted and happy. If that isn't love, I don't know what is. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My mother point-blank told us she didn't want children and my father had begged and begged her for me. Then my younger sister was an accident. It's always been an awkward, very strained and very tainted relationship. For a long time I held a ton of resentment and disgust for her. It's made me into what I consider to be a pretty great parent myself though. I wanted children, and even knowing I'd be giving up sleep and freedoms, I knew that I wanted them to know that they were wanted, planned for, and adored. My dad remarried and adopted 2 kids off his second wives, and then they had another one together, making us a family of 5. Now I get so much in the way of a rich childhood for my children with all of their cousins and aunts and uncles to love them. So I guess it's not always completely life-ruining, but it did have a profound effect on the first half of my life for sure, like how I felt about myself. It set the tone for the rest of my life, one of those hindsight's is 20/20 things. I honestly believe if I'd never had a kid, particularly as young and alone as I was in a very socially backwards area, I'd have made a lot more of myself. I know that could be taken as self-rationalization for a lack of trying and failures, but I also know how I felt, how I've never bonded with my kid, and how both of our lives could have been a lot better had I either waited to have her or let another couple adopt her like I wanted, but was forced out of the choice. Now, this is a taboo subject. People want to say doing it in the butt is taboo or substances or that sort of thing. No, this is the kind of taboo that is actually taboo in our culture. Good question. My mom just kind of forgot we existed and had another baby to keep her happy. I have 10 siblings. I grew up number 8 out of 9 kids. My oldest sister was responsible for raising each and every one of us, and to this day she resents our mum for stealing her childhood. My sisters told us stories where as newborns would cry and my mum would refuse to get up and get us. She'd just wait until my sister, who was a full-time student, would get up and take care of us while my mum just continued to lay in bed. My mum knew she could continue to collect welfare as long as she had children in the house, so she prolonged her welfare dependence by having so many. My ex-girlfriend baby-trapped me. She stopped taking her birth control and didn't tell me, then cheated on me while pregnant. She was, and still is, a bad person. At that point, I wanted nothing to do with her and wasn't prepared to be a father. I was young and dumb and still learning who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. She gave me the option to walk away and never see the kid again. I thought about it but couldn't bring myself to, knowing my kid was out there was going to weigh heavily on my conscience. It was difficult at times. While my friends were studying, partying, and traveling, I was working and learning to be a father. I didn't want this kid, but here I was, and I was going to make the best out of the situation. My daughter is 13 now, and I have full custody. Her mother's a piece of garbage still, and my daughter's old enough to know the difference. My daughter's with me, and I couldn't be happier. She's a driving force in my life. I need to be responsible, I need to be accountable, I need to be financially successful. It keeps me going forward and has really made me the man I am today. Having a kid when you're barely 20 has ways of making or breaking someone. My daughter was the child I didn't want, but ended up being what I needed. A very close friend has 2 kids, 6 and 2.5, but really because her husband wanted kids and she knew he'd leave her if she stood her ground on not wanting kids. She loves her kids with all her heart, but misses the life she could have had without them. Aside from work, she just started her residency, all she does is being a mum. She has little to no time for her own hobbies anymore and misses that a lot. I can't say if the kids notice that at their age, but I worry they might at some point, or that she'll one day just crack and resent either her kids or her husband for taking that child-free life from her. Just to clarify, they talked openly about the situation before getting married, or even engaged, and she knew her options and made the conscious choice to stay with her partner, even if that meant updating her life plans. She's not unhappy or miserable, and neither are her partner or kids. She simply has her what-if moments, but I'm sure many of us have those. Sure, many would have made a different decision, but it was ultimately her decision in this case, and she made it. I don't know, that sounds like some of the normal amount of restlessness and thinking back that's normal for parents to me. Not to downplay what this woman is feeling, as it's a big deal, just a big deal that a lot of parents grapple with, and she shouldn't feel bad for it. My husband and I have been raising my niece for 3.5 years. We also had my teenage nephew for a year before we had her, but growing up with my sister as a mum had done more damage to him than we could handle. My niece is almost 16 now. I'm 29 and I feel like I gave up my fun and careless years to raise my sister's kids. I've always dreamed of having my own children, and now that I'm struggling to conceive, I can't help but feel resentful that I'm raising one of my junky sister's 6 healthy children. Overall, my niece is a good kid. I love her and I want her to do well in life, but she doesn't feel like she's our kid, and she doesn't think of us when she thinks about who her parents are. She experienced a lot of bad stuff while living with my sister, and it's a lot to handle. She's had some pretty dark periods in her life. Her counselor keeps advising us to do more stuff with her and spend more time to pull her out of her bad places. I feel like my mental energy is already 90% devoted to her, and the thought of giving up even more of the 10% reserved for me and my husband is incredibly daunting. It doesn't help that I grew up in a fairly dysfunctional household, and my niece is one of my biggest triggers that brings those issues back up for me. I was just starting therapy to work on my past traumas when my niece started having a bunch of issues. So all of my sessions became managing her issues instead of dealing with my own. All I wanted when I was her age was somebody to save me from the dysfunction I was in growing up. I feel like I'm giving her exactly what I wanted as a teen, but it's not enough for her and she doesn't appreciate it. I've also witnessed all of my siblings and my nephew go totally off the rails and into addiction and bad life choices. So my niece developing a bunch of issues at this age triggered the heck out of me and made me feel like I was fighting against her inevitable downfall. Add that in with my complicated relationship with my sister and the resentment I feel towards her for placing this burden on me, the family I have to maintain contact with so that I'm not keeping my niece from them, and the fact that I'm not my niece's legal guardian, so every medical thing is a huge hassle, and it's all just too much. I feel trapped and like I'm sacrificing my own future children on the slim chance that my niece might overcome my family's generational dysfunction. My ex-husband was a manipulative man, and if I'm being completely honest with myself, forced me into losing our kid at 20 weeks pregnant. I wasn't ready and I hadn't really had a chance to grieve. He quit his job 3 days into my required maternity leave, so I had to go back to work as soon as physically possible. Our son was 13 weeks early, spent 2 months in the NICU, and cost over $1 million in his first year. Thank goodness for insurance. Now my son is almost 7, his father hasn't been in the picture for years, and until recently I was doing it all on my own. My son showed incredible strength to grow big enough to breathe on his own and come home. So I've made it my mission to give him a great life and make sure he never knows that I didn't want to be a parent after my first pregnancy didn't go so well. I've honestly thought about this question before. My son, 14 months, male, was planned, and he's incredible, absolutely a light in our lives. On the other hand, I was super ill the entire pregnancy, depressed and struggling up until a few months ago. Now, this was made worse by 2 moves, military, and COVID of course, but I never ever want to do this again. Not quite the same, but similar. We get so much pressure on the next kid from friends and family, and everyone assumes you'll have more. I absolutely am a one-and-done kind of person, at least biologically. I did not enjoy the baby days, and now that he's a toddler, he's great. I know 2 would be just above my capacity, and I'd regret having another. That being said, my husband and I are both really drawn to fostering, and will likely do so when we're at our final posting location and our kid is a bit older. My girlfriend had a 2-year-old when I met her. He's 5 now. I didn't plan to have kids, but I love my girl. I'm pretty much used to it. I teach her son stuff and he's attached to my hip when he's here, joint custody with the father. But ideally, I'd have preferred to not have a kid around. I can deal though. He can be a little crap bag sometimes. Also, it's weird disciplining someone else's kid, so I'm just getting there. I can see the betrayal in his eyes. I'm supposed to be like the fun uncle, and getting onto him is weird. Never really said that out loud. This is liberating. Unwanted kids are a tragedy for everyone involved, including society. I don't have any data to back this up, but I'd be willing to bet every dime I'll ever make that prisons aren't filled with people whose emotionally and mentally healthy parents specifically wanted them. Faking it? Medical professionals share their craziest, yeah, nice try, buddy, stories. I've tested the hearing of a few kids, like ages 10 through 12 years old, pretending to be deaf in one ear. All you do is turn on your microphone and talk into the deaf ear at a quiet level and ask them a question about something they care about. Like young boys, for example, will always fall for it when you ask them, "What video games do you play?" at 20 decibels. It works every time. This is off topic, but a bartender once told me that if someone looked underage trying to buy alcohol, he'd ask me to look at their hands and say, "No, you're not 18. All of the actual minors would be wide-eyed and incredulous and ask how he knew just from looking at their hands. All of the ones 18 years or older would call him out on it. Emergency medical services here had a patient start seizing in front of the cops after they were pulled over for possible drunk driving. We get there and the patient is still off and on seizing. We get them on the stretcher and then in the back of the ambulance. Surprisingly, a cop joins us. As I take their arm, the shakes start up again, so I tell them, "Yo, if you want this medication, you need to stop so that I can start an IV real quick." The patient stops to let me start the line, and once I'm done, they start back up. You've got to say, "Get the ocular needle," and have someone else say, "Wait, you mean the one that goes in the eye?" And then they magically always stop seizing. At least the fakers do. Not a doctor, but a hearing aid dispenser in private practice. Young guy in his mid-20s, which is already unusual. Main issue is that he's getting noise complaints about his music. No issues with his ears physically, so I do the hearing test. Basically ends up with a profound hearing loss. Weird, because that's basically sign language territory that he's in there. I walk behind him and ask what his plans are for the evening, to which he responds appropriately. Definitely what we call a non-organic hearing loss. He was trying to get the results he wanted to justify being a jerk of a neighbor. My mother was an ER doctor at the time. Scruffy guy, mid-50s, comes in looking for non-specific help. Confused, smelly, dressed in ragged mismatched thrift store suit, clearly homeless and just looking for a bed. Keeps muttering something about quantum, obviously a little off his rocker. Mum decides might as well give him a workup and teach the residents. And it turns out the guy's in near total renal failure, so they give him dialysis. And snaps too. Suddenly coherent. Suddenly sane. Suddenly talking about actual real quantum physics. Turns out he's a maths professor. Some organ problem sent him into a mental tailspin on his way to a conference a month earlier. He got off his train in the wrong city and had been wandering the streets ever since, missing and presumed dead. So they're not always faking. Wow, I wasn't expecting this. That's incredible. That guy was probably in danger of just being sent out if they'd been more tired and frustrated, or had a more dismissive doctor. I wonder if that guy had a family who was super relieved to find out. I hope that wandering around with organ failure for a whole month didn't do too much of a number on his long-term health, though. I had an employee tell me their spine couldn't stay straight, and when they tried to sit up, they'd flop to the left or right. They followed that up with telling me they found out this was due to one of their lungs being deflated. You know, because your lungs hold your spine straight. A highlight of my career when he finally quit because he just wasn't about that cubicle life. My mum's like the kind of doctors that see the patient and determine their illness and either deal with the medications or send them to a specialist. She always sees people who are addicted to meds and want the medicines, or who are homeless and trying to find a place to stay. They'll do anything to prove that they're sick. It's kinda sad, to be honest. She told me this story of a woman who came in and said she had been having seizures, and as a result she couldn't move her arms. So my mum tested her arms and tried to push it and see if she'd react. The woman kept resisting and trying to keep her arm in place, since she couldn't move it. My mum had to control herself from laughing and told the woman that she needed to relax. She then left the room and discharged the patient. Patient comes in saying she has terrible abdominal pain, 10 out of 10. I say, "Okay," and I start to examine her. She immediately starts screaming the moment I touch her belly. But look, I've seen patients in terrible pain and nobody has ever yelled in pain with their eyes open. She wasn't even tensing or anything. It was a really sad case though. She had a history of coming in and saying she was pregnant, when the urine and blood test was pretty clearly negative. In one case, she even tried to steal a pregnant patient's urine, and got caught pretty fast. She was on psych follow-up, not sure what the diagnosis was, but my guess would have been Munchausen's. Anyway, we sent her home without pain meds. My second patient was a man with a chronic cough. I asked him, "Are you smoking?" And he says, "No." I examine him and there's a cigarette pack right in his breast pocket. "Nah, doc, I don't drink, just beer." ER doctor. Had the worst person in the world with fake seizures that could only be cured by Dilaudid, incidentally the most potent opiate that could be administered in the hospital's IV, usually. Seizures aren't treated by opiates. This lady was insufferable, and she knew all the rules. She'd make sure her enabling husband, IQ approximately 50, would come in so she had a driver so she could get narcs. If we didn't give narcs, she'd shut the place down screaming and threatening. She'd spy on the parking lot to see which doctors were working, because she remembered the ones who'd administered her Dilaudid in the past. Well, one day I'd frickin' had it. She brought her son, IQ normal, to the ER. He had a learner's permit, she assured me. And then she started fake seizing and screaming. I just let her go. Then she got threatening, so I called security and I was the first person to ever get her removed. She then proceeds to walk out the doors with her son, and not 15 minutes later she's back in the ER as a trauma patient, full collar and all. She says she's gonna sue me, that she'd gone outside, had a seizure, fallen and is in more pain. Dilaudid. So I stop her right there and walk to security around the corner and look at the security tape. In the footage, she very clearly looked around, made sure nobody was looking, then gently laid down in a mangled position. In the video, it looked like her son said, "Screw this," and he literally walks away and does the several miles home on foot. I went and cleared her from her C-collar and backboard after calling the police. They came and didn't do anything. Hey, she was back 2 days later. Doctor goes, do you need to refill your meds? Patient says, no, I'm still taking them. Well, I'm asking because I know based off my prescription that it's time for you to get more. If you don't need more, it means you aren't taking them. I scared the daylights out of my pharmacist by doing the opposite of this. I started taking sertraline for bad anxiety problems I've had since I was a kid, but only about 6 months or so ago. At one point I ran out, and I'm terrible at taking it on time and regularly, though I am getting into a routine now. So 3 weeks after I ran out of my supply, I went to my pharmacy to refill because I finally had the time and money. And the pharmacist looked at it and then very quietly went, "Are you okay? If you stop taking these, it can cause really dangerous thoughts or actions, and even worse, anxiety and depression." I'd already gone through that part of it and was mostly okay at the time, so I told him I was fine. Now he asks fairly regularly or watches me past the pharmacy with a concerned look on his face. Patient came in with seizures, nonspecific weakness, lightheadedness, and numbness and tingling in her hands and feet. She gets admitted because of some electrolyte issue, not related to the neurosymptoms as these were corrected later and symptoms persisted. Sure enough, on the second day she seizes. As soon as the diazepam is pushed, before the flush is even in, she stops seizing. This happens again 3 hours later. The third time while she was seizing, we took her hand and tried to drop it on her face twice. Both times she moved her hand out of the way so that it wouldn't smack herself in the face. We just stood there until she got tired of shaking. It took about 5 minutes. She left against medical advice a few hours later. I had a patient flop around like a fish out of water in my waiting room while shouting, "I'm having a seizure!" People faking seizures is actually fairly common. You smack them with some ammonia salts and then suddenly they're fine. Funniest story of my medical school career. We were rounding on the wards for a teenage son whose parents were in the room. The dad goes, "We saw our son tested positive for Mary J. This is clearly incorrect." The attending goes, "There are some false positives, but the test is pretty accurate." My son is a lifeguard. He would never smoke. The son pipes up, "Yeah, I've never smoked," looking scared as frick. Well, I guess we could order a more sensitive test that will give a more accurate answer. Well, I do sit really high up on a lifeguard chair and I think some of the kids around the pool smoke, so maybe I breathed in some smoke while working. We all frantically end the conversation to leave the room and the team just laughs hysterically. Whew, that's the kind of lengthy workaround that patients in our medical videos normally reserve for explaining how things got stuck up their rear ends, instead of just saying, "I wanted to see what it would feel like." Glad to see it applied to something else. I'm an EMT if that counts, so here's one of my best. About 85% of the calls we receive, at least in my towns, are issues where they clearly aren't severely injured and just think, "If I call 911, I'll get into the hospital faster." Pro tip, you still wait like everyone else unless you're actually dying. Another part of this percentage of people are ones that just want attention or medication. We had a woman recently that decided she was going to have a seizure in the ambulance. A real seizure, put simply, usually looks like they're just tensing up and twitching in one position. This lady was flailing every part of her body everywhere and trying to spit on everything. Not only was it clearly fake, but we had to clean up the damn mess she made. Would usually let it slide, but I pulled out a nasal airway and a lubricant packet and said loudly to my partner, "We need to stabilize her breathing. I'll put it in the airway in a second, just let me apply the lube so it doesn't tear open her nose like it normally does." The instant I said that, she stopped having her seizure. A miracle. An unrelated story, but we also had another woman who claimed that she couldn't get up after a fall in her house. We arrived to her entire house being locked, so we called through a cracked window to see if there was any other way inside besides breaking through her screen. She proceeds to stand up, go to the front door, unlock said door, walk back to where she was and lay back down. We did a generic checkup and there was clearly nothing wrong. When she said she didn't want to go to the hospital and we were about to leave, she stopped us and asked us to call Comcast for her, since we are the EMS and are a higher priority. In short, fake seizures and faking an injury to have EMS call Comcast for you. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? An ex of mine told me a story about a guy that had a window wiper handle stuck up his butt because he apparently had one lying in the shower, slipped and fell onto it. It never occurred to her that it might not have been an accident. I'm an ERRN, the old "I fell on it" excuse. Classic. So you were walking around your house undressed and fell backwards onto this cucumber that just happened to be sticking straight up out of the floor? Well, okay, I have to write down exactly what you tell me. Okay, so this guy wasn't exactly faking it, but had an unconscious woman brought in by paramedics with blood alcohol level well over 0.2. She had been found passed out on the floor by the parents of the toddlers she had been hired to watch. They were terribly worried about her, so the staff explained that she was unconscious because of her high blood alcohol level. They asked, completely seriously, what would cause that, because she doesn't drink. PA here, not a doctor, and I have a couple, but when I was on my clinical rotations, one of the funny things I remember was on my ER rotation. This one lady was in complaining of some vague, generalized pain, had a feeling that she was malingering. I started a neuro exam and was testing her cranial nerves. Asked her to keep her head still and follow my pen. She was clearly focusing on the wall behind me and not tracking my movements. I said again, "No, follow the pen, with your eyes." She said over and over that she can't and that she's really trying and this must be really bad. So I moved on to another exam while talking with her and holding her attention. I walked around her bed from one side to the other. She tracked me with her eyes the whole time. It was the same rotation where we had someone feigning seizures in order to get Ativan. It might have been the same lady on a separate occasion, now that I think of it. Vet student here, used to work as a technician near a major university as I went through undergrad before being accepted into vet school. The amount of animals, mainly dogs, who'd come in with college students on the weekends after ingesting substances or booze the students left out is higher than I would have expected. But the owners won't tell us the animal got into their stash because they don't want to get in trouble? Even though we know that's what happened because of the side effects the dog is experiencing. But we need the confirmation from the owner. So just tell us. Making up a story or saying something else happened isn't helping you or your pet, especially in life-threatening situations. In order to properly treat the substance or toxicity, we need to know what it is. I promise you, we aren't interested in getting you in trouble. We're interested in saving your pet. Help us do so and be honest when you visit the doctor or vet. So you're saying that this dog who startles at the slightest movement, has a heart rate of 72 BPM and is peeing all over the floor, didn't get into your Mary J stash? I guess we're going to have to run some very expensive blood work, and when that comes back normal, send you to the neurologist for an MRI. Besides it endangering the animal, the owners are going to end up spending a whole heck of a lot more extra money as we run tests trying to figure out the issue. This one girl kept saying she didn't do any crystal or hallucinogens, but said people would look evil and that she couldn't watch TV or listen to music. She was admitted for a self-deletion attempt and stayed in her room almost all day. More than a month went by and then I met her. Negative CT, substance screen negative all month, and medical Mary J on admission. I asked her what her evil visions looked like and she really struggled, but then said something that triggered my memory. She said that teeth looked big and sharp. I asked some follow-up questions, and she said that people looked much closer than they actually were, or moved much faster or slower than they should. Had a pretty significant migraine history. It seemed like they had photo and phonophobia, nausea and scintillation scotoma, and fortification spectra as some of her evil spirits. So I stopped the super high-dose antipsychotics that we were giving her. They have a lower epilepsy threshold and they trigger migraines. And she was started on Topamax and escitalopram. After 2 weeks, symptoms resolved. Diagnosis? Alice in Wonderland syndrome as aura of migraines induced by antipsychotics in a teen with depression and/or psychotic features. The moral of the story? Sometimes they are just telling the truth the best way they know how. I brush and floss every day, said every patient ever at the dentist. I lied to my dentist as a child more than to any other adult ever. Well, folks, now we've all been collectively called out. At least we weren't trying to get illegal substances. We were just throwing out any excuse we could in front of the oncoming train of judgment and advice that we already knew we should have been following. For shame. I'm a medical assistant. Had this teenage girl, probably 16, come in saying that her wrist was broken. Her mum was behind her, rolling her eyes after every time she'd tell me how bad it hurt. She then proceeded to flop it in an attempt to show me how bad it hurt when she did that. She said it was clearly broken and she'd need a cast. I said I'd take her back and let the doctors do some x-rays and do their thing. The mother asked to talk to me outside of the room and she told me her daughter's friend recently got a cast and her daughter was notorious for being overly jealous. I just responded by saying if there were anything wrong, it would show up in the x-ray. Guess what? She didn't get a cast and threw a fit. Last I saw her was her crying and throwing a temper tantrum outside of the waiting room and being dragged out by her very embarrassed and resigned mother. I see a lot of pain, substances, and pseudo-seizures in this thread. Since I'm in internal medicine, I saw a patient recently who was like, "Yeah, doc, I take my insulin every day." HbA1c was higher than the lab could measure. Our report only goes up to 17%. This guy's blood was basically syrup. For everyone's information, diabetes is diagnosed with an A1C of 6.5%. Bad is anything greater than 8%. I once had a patient with an A1C of 13%, and at her follow-up appointment with a neurologist after her stroke, he wrote in his note, "The highest A1C I've ever seen." And I was like, "Ha!" I have another patient who told me that he really needed a prescription for Mary J because when he was actively using it, his blood sugars were under control. Under control with an HbA1c of 14%. I guess I should acknowledge that a lot of people have trouble affording their meds, and I'm very aware that this results in non-adherence. If you're having trouble affording your meds, let your doctor know. There are $4 lists at Target, Walmart, and some grocery chains. GoodRx is also a tool to help people find affordable meds. Some of my greatest victories have been getting people from poorly controlled blood pressure and diabetes to well-controlled just because of these simple tools. A friend of mine was a counselor. She was assigned a tough case. A patient who presented as an alcoholic, but who insisted up and down to every counselor and doctor he sat down in front of that he only had 1 drink a day. I can't remember what it was, vodka maybe? He never wavered in that. 1 drink a day. But he had a lot of the symptoms and life problems of a complete alcoholic. My friend was the first one to ask, "How big is your drink?" And he admitted it was a flower vase. I'm the patient who lied. Before my sobriety, I did some doctor shopping. After that got hip, I'd have to go around urgent cares and stuff. I ended up needing something badly, so I went to my GP. I've been going to him for years. We're talking like since I was 18. I told him I was sober and had tooth pain and back pain and other pains and that I'd tried everything. Against what he was supposed to do, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Both of us know what you're saying right now is complete horse crap." Turns out my doctor was in AA. I ended up leaving after crying for 30 minutes. Got sober within the next 6 months. He goes to my home group and is still my doctor. I'm a therapist, but I do diagnosing if that counts. I had a woman in my office claiming she had multiple personalities. Dissociative identity disorder is kind of a sticky diagnosis to begin with, but she was claiming that she could talk to different personalities and then bring them out if she needed to. All of this seemed like it could be potentially more of a psychotic disorder or attention-seeking, and then she introduced me to her girlfriend who also apparently had multiple personalities, which they started naming, most of whom were based on candy or Disney princesses. Notably, the bad one was called The Beast. I actually asked her if she'd seen the movie Split during our session, and she said it was just a coincidence. I'm a dentist. We have a med tracking program shared with any narcotic prescriber that tells me what patients have filled out what. I just need their name and date of birth. I get people seeking medication every now and then with real or fake pain claiming that they haven't been taking anything. A quick search shows me the truth. Most people don't know I can do this. The look on their faces is always pretty funny. Liar, liar, pants on fire. If aliens ask for proof that humanity deserves to live, what 2 items would you show? I had to put the family dog down yesterday. As I walked out, I saw 3 lit candles sitting on the counter in the main lobby area in front of a sign that said, "Someone is saying goodbye to a loved one, please speak softly and be respectful." That was one of the most beautiful, human things that I've seen in a while. I'd just pulled myself back together. Needless to say, I lost it again. But, being that everyone in the lobby was absolutely being quiet and respectful in a usually semi-chatty room, it was a bit of a faith in humanity restorer. I like dogs, so yeah, I'll babble out that experience at them, and we probably get vaporized because it's very specific to me. Sorry guys. I was at the vet with my cat, who was in to be neutered. Sorry cat. Anyway, the candle was lit, someone came in with their big dog, saw the candle, and asked to pay for the bill for the family that was putting their dog down. My faith in humanity was restored. Also, the day I saw a fully loaded log truck driver lock up his brakes on a highway to let a squirrel across the road. Anne Frank said that she believed, despite everything, that people were inherently good. I'm not sure I have quite that level of optimism, but I choose to believe there is some truth in her words. A Chopin Nocturne and a wildlife rehabilitation center. As someone who loves classical music and volunteers at a wildlife rehabilitation center, I applaud this answer. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and that video of him testifying before the Senate Subcommittee on Communications. OxyClean and the original Crossfire commercial. Dolly Parton and a puppy. Can I feed them a pizza? Everyone loves pizza. I don't even need a second thing, but I'll go with alien poison to add to the pizza if it looks like they're not digging it. Oh wait, it's better if you add some of this. Here you go. My banana bread, because business opportunities don't get any better, and then bribe them with my prettiest rock. The idea of the future of Earth being determined by a small business owner trying to sell bread made with old bananas honestly seems on brand for our species, so who am I to argue? So, about 9 months ago I did a heroic dose of psilocybin, and this exact scenario happened to me. They said they were here to pass judgment on humanity. They felt humanity was a failed experiment, but said they'd give the Earth more time to figure it out if I could just provide one reason humans were worth sparing. I was in my kitchen at the time and pulled out a tiny cheese grater. It was maybe 2 inches tall with a little magnet on the back to mount on the fridge. I opened my palm to present to them my tiny cheese grater, and there was dead silence. They looked down at the cheese grater, then back to me, then to the cheese grater, and they started laughing. Then I started laughing, and then they agreed to spare humanity. You're welcome. Their rationale for why they accepted the cheese grater was because of humanity's capacity for humor and joy. If humans are capable of humor, then they can be capable of kindness. They found the tiny cheese grater so absurd and so unique in the universe that humanity was worth keeping around a little while longer. I'd present to them a bottle of ozone and a healed femur. Repairing the hole in the ozone layer is perhaps humanity's greatest ecological success story. We recognized a harmful situation, came together collectively to resolve it, stuck to our principles, and came out the other side with meaningful, ongoing progress. And a healed femur? For the uninitiated, femurs are some of the most important bones in our bodies. We're omnivores, yes, but we needed to hunt and gather when we were a very young civilization. If you broke your femur, that's 6 weeks of recuperation, where you aren't hunting or gathering, just healing. A fully healed femur shows that we stopped and took care of someone who needed it dearly for their own sake. It's the impulse of common humanity to stand together and improve. The pains and horrors of the last few centuries that we've seen are the result of the few, exploiting us and our worse impulses to their own benefit. I'd offer them beer and bread, probably humanity's greatest and oldest inventions. It could be argued that beer and bread is one thing, but in solid and liquid forms. David Attenborough and Jane Goodall. The entirety of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood on DVD, and some Mary J. A library card and the book it was used to get. Freely disseminating knowledge to people through the library is easily our greatest achievement. My left mammary gland and my right mammary gland. That's a bold move. They'll destroy humanity if they're butt guys. The video of Fleetwood Mac performing Silver Springs live. They'll be so invested in the tea, they won't kill us. Polio vaccination and a fresh loaf of bread. Symbols of our battle against and collaboration with microorganisms. I think I'd show them Trump and TikTok because they'll be so enraged that at least it will be quick. In this scenario, do we know anything about the aliens and what their culture's like? Because my answer would be very different if they're space communists or space capitalists. Mr. Rogers and Bob Ross videos. A guitar and drums. Show me what you've got! Dark Side of the Moon and a bong. Both middle fingers in the air. Welcome to Earth, motherfrickers. 1. A wheelchair to show them that we have empathy for those differently abled and that we look for ways to include them. And 2. A hospital to show that we want to help those who are ill. Cheese and scissors. A dog. We created them. They were predators. Maybe they'll think we're dangerous mutators, but who wouldn't find a little puppy adorable? Okay, just don't give them a chihuahua. I'd show them that science has shown everything is made up of individual atoms, proving that our scientific knowledge is growing and becoming advanced. I'd then show them an impressionistic painting by Monet. That would show them that our science knowledge is greatly advanced, but our ability to dream is equally advanced. A banana and some duct tape. I see your banana and duct tape and raise you a urinal and a can of Campbell's soup. Sir David Attenborough. Oh, this is easy. The only valid answer is to sing Get Swifty. Cute cats and funny cat videos. Yeah, but then they'll probably only save the cats. I was going to say kittens and chocolate. I think a Japanese garden with cherry trees in bloom should be sufficient, right? A photo of volunteers helping in disaster relief. Show them how much dogs love their people. Dogs don't lie. Then let them watch how we make Mackinac Island fudge, but don't tell them the ingredients. We've got to make them need us. A bidet and a line of white snow. A puppy and a newborn baby. You gotta let them hit the pendulum, and then a lava lamp would probably do the trick. So many people are saying stuff about bedroom favors, and I get it, but that's a very narcissistic answer. Aliens wouldn't give an F about that stuff because it doesn't do anything for them. Like, hey, show off what you have because you value it. Who cares? We've got to prove that we have value in this completely made-up scenario and game. We don't, we'd be screwed because most of the world is not altruistic. Indeed. Imagine how you'd feel if a randy sentient lobster showed you lobster smut. I don't think it would do anything for you. Cool soundtrack, though. Oh, I only need one object. The movie Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland. If I can show them the whole thing, I guarantee I have them in the bag by You and I. A copy machine and microchips. Both shows humanity can improve their understanding and disseminate information across our species. This means we can change our ways if presented compelling reasons to do so, which puts us above other animals on our planet as only we can adapt species-wide. Don't know what my number 2 would be, but number 1 would probably be the video of Mr. Rogers testifying before Congress back in the 1960s to ask them to fund PBS for kids. The love letters from my husband. The fact one human being can feel that way about another human being. I won't bother asking them for anything, I'll just ask them to take me home. In a sci-fi series I read, one of the alien species wants our universal repair material. The officers can't figure out what they're referring to because such a magical item doesn't exist in their mind, until they ask a senior chief who instantly knows that they mean duct tape. They give them a box of it and they're amazed we'd be so generous with such a precious treasure. New allies for life. You know if you take it to the ship's engineering division, they'll probably at least see that we've got something in common, right? Because if there's one thing I know, it's that all engineers love duct tape, and I have to assume that goes across all sentient species. I would shrug and walk away. But seriously, for real. First off, in the 60 seconds, I can't find any good stuff within my immediate reach. Most examples people are saying here would just prove to them how shallow we humans are. And is humanity even worth saving? I'd argue we're not. Go on, aliens, do your thing. The only great item I have in my reach right now is popcorn to put in the microwave, ready in 60 seconds, just in time so that I can enjoy the show. D's peanuts? Are we worth saving, though? Charlie Chaplin's Great Dictator speech and Star Trek's Picard's Measure of a Man speech. Mr. Rogers telling kids he loved them just the way they are. A polio vaccine and an iron lung. We're capable of enormous creativity and compassion. Punch them in the face. Humanity is not worth saving. You know how in the three-body problem, the woman disregards the alien warning not to make contact and reaches out anyway because the government is so screwed that alien invasion would be an improvement? Yeah, I get it. Don Giovanni DVD, Tetley's Bitter. My cat with chronic kidney disease and the syringe I use to feed him. No sense in saving humanity unless it can save something other than. Alright, I unzip my pants. Just pictures of my kids? I know it's probably not enough to save the world, but maybe we don't need saving, and this way I get to go out looking at my kids one last time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My puppy and a cold beer. I show them a young child, and then I show them the devastation that idiots wreak, and then I beg for them to take care of the latter in sake of the former. Wish granted, no more billionaires or even millionaires. Everyone's now a slave of our alien overlords living in 150 slave communities in subhuman conditions building an intergalactic death laser because Yugug the alien had some beef with Wugaghowiks of the third-dimensional cluster. Thank you. Not. A Nintendo 64 with GoldenEye and a freshly microwaved Hot Pocket. Salma Hayek and Sofia Vergara. Species saved. Probably an atomic bomb and then an EUV lithography machine. I think the ability of humans to create such horrors while also such intricately beautiful creations makes them seem more balanced and honest of a species. I'd give them Laurel and Hardy singing and dancing Shine On Harvest Moon. Wouldn't need a second item. Steve Irwin and Mr. Rogers. Nothing. I let them do it. I whip out my phone and play Louis Armstrong's 1920s recording of West End Blues. Then I play some Django Reinhardt. Problem solved. It's a Wonderful Life, and The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Me sweeping up in front of my neighbor's property before I sweep mine. A group of kids playing in a playground. A group of elderly people doing Tai Chi in the same park. Screw that, I'm showing them two things that will make them kill us as quickly as possible. Maybe footage of Germany's atrocities in World War II and Skibbity Toilet. I think that should do it. Puppies and dogs and how much they love us. And, libraries? Showing the knowledge we share as well as the stories that human can come up with. Creating an entirely different world for us to enjoy. Fred Rogers, Steve Irwin, Dolly Parton, if there's time left, Bob Ross, Carl Sagan, and if I still have time, LeVar Burton, Reading Rainbow. The Firefly box set and a fresh, warm churro. A toddler at age 1.5, a loving couple of 60 years together. Pictures of my cat and dog. I don't need humanity saved, but I might as well try to make sure they're taken care of. I've got 2 items for you, each of which are attached to a woman's chest. Some green herb / Mary J in a vaporizer, and a cold Mountain Dew Code Red. They'd not only save us, they'd worship us as gods. Simple. The DVD set of Cosmos, A Personal Voyage by Dr. Carl Sagan, and a firefighting airplane where pilots risk their lives to save the property and lives of others. A beer and a second beer. I'd bend over to open my backpack like I'm about to produce a couple of Bach CDs, but instead whip out my piece and start blasting. Screw you, aliens, and leave our cows alone too. I'll show them a guinea pig and explain that they could never survive in nature and humans are the only reason their cuteness can endure in the world. Then I'd show them the Lord of the Rings trilogy extended cut. Hell, at this point I'll push the button for them. Children and animals. Children are cute to us because they're the young of our own species. I think they'd find them as cute as we find baby flies. Yeah, I mean, even other people's babies are just ugly little pudges to me. Music and art. If they're intelligent, then they'll have emotions, which means they'll value the beauty in art and music. I'll show them what humanity is capable of when we aren't murdering each other over social constructs. If that doesn't work, then I'll show them my heart. Humans have a deep capacity to love and empathize with others despite our equally cavernous capacity for hatred and violence. It might sway them from destroying us. Otherwise, I'll just show them the evidence of climate change and convince them we're destroying ourselves and don't need their help marching towards extinction. That leaves us an open to deal with climate change and to potentially overcome the Great Filter whilst surviving the slaughter of an ET civilization. Internet and the off button on a computer or TV. I show them my cat and give them a beer. Fred Rogers and Dolly Parton. You know, I think Fred Rogers probably wins the most mentions in this topic, with the runner-up being the footage of Fred Rogers testifying before the Senate about his funding or whatever that clip is. Guys, we get it. You liked the movie with Tom Hanks in it. Now let's move along. I'm not certain that humanity is worth saving. I'm guessing that humanity's existence on this planet will be far shorter than the dinosaurs. We've developed a pattern for existence that simply isn't sustainable, and a stubbornness that won't accept change. Easy, give them food and art. Nothing explains humanity better than flavor and imagination. In Rainbow's album by Radiohead, and the E.T. movie by Steven Spielberg. My kids. A photo of Earth from space and a piece of music. Cats and DMT. Both of my middle fingers and then a crotch grab Michael Jackson style for good measure. That should end this crap show, but good. Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. Bach's Cello Concerto and the Pieta. An acoustic guitar and a vibrating adult toy. Nuke them! A golden retriever and its owner. My left middle finger and my right middle finger. If you're gonna end it, then shut up and do it. Don't sit there and try to pass judgment on me. These testes. Turkish kebab and Arsenal. Once they start following, they'll be hooked to save us until Arsenal win the league. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Maggots have made humanity unredeemable. Those of us who are not maggots must sacrifice ourselves for the purge that must happen. Aliens, purge us of this maggot scourge. Probably the proof of quantum entanglement and DNA. Empty right hand and empty left hand. We gone. My sweet peachy behind with an invitation to probe away. Nothing. Let the aliens destroy our planet. Screw everyone. No-kill animal shelters. White Monster and Matcha. A video of puppies. 2 films, Come and See and A Serbian Film, just so they eradicate us faster. A very slow 4K video panning down the length of my ding-dong, 60 seconds long, set to absolutely throbbing house techno. At the very end, an androgynous voice with lots of reverb would whisper, "The element is blue." Dog shoes and that motorized wheelchair contraption that Rescue made so that their disabled goat could get around by itself. Cat videos. Undertale and Papyrus. And also Papyrus! A second time. Do living things count? I'd choose a puppy and a kitty. Humanity made them the precious cute things they are now. I know we've also created some messed up breeds with health problems, but we'll show them a golden retriever puppy and any nice kitten. I can't prove we're worth saving, but I can show them where to start the mass annihilation. Technology, because there's a lot of stuff that technology can help with. Yeah, I've got nothing. I play Claire de Lune, and show them the whales, of course. I wouldn't bother. There's the Earth, guys. Burn it down. Dungeon Crawler Carl. Book and audiobook. I might not be looking to save humanity, guys, full disclosure. Ice dancing and ice sculpture. The former is deriving incredible beauty and athleticism from something really dangerous, and the latter because it's deriving beauty from something that will be gone in a few hours. South Park and computers. A dog's affection for its owner. 1. Pretty lights. We'll go with the recent Secret Dreams set. PL Team. It's got to be the actual soundboard for the aliens. And maybe, I don't know, a high-quality DMT vape pen. Penn and Teller's The Invisible String, and Elvis Presley? Can't impress an alien race capable of interstellar travel with anything we have, and could possibly come in the next 100 years, so I'd hope they have eyes or other ways of processing visible light, and they're into art to show them the Vestal Virgin Tuccia sculpture by Antonio Corradini, or maybe some Michelangelo. Big-chested goth girlfriend. 2 number 9s, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip, a number 7, 2 number 45s, one with cheese, and a large soda. Penn and Teller swear by invisible string in the exact scenario we're talking about. Corny jokes and plants and animals. Who's going to take care of them? Us, the good people. Real answer, photos from the James Webb Telescope. And joke answer, Twitter screenshots followed by, do what you must. My grandbabies. Bofa. Oh, that won't happen. MAGA will have the aliens deported without due process. They do this with other lives that aren't from their part of town. One of those videos of someone giving water to a thirsty bee. Rick and Morty and Scrimshaw. I give them a piece of pizza and Chopin's ballad in G minor. Reels of Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Videotapes of Mr. Rogers and a banging barbecue. Salt Lick Barbecue in Austin and Marie D. WD-40 and duct tape. Plastics and nuclear weapons. Oh wait, you said items to save us. Tamagotchis and Crocs? I don't know, who knows? Maybe they like war-loving civilizations that favor strength and narcissism over woo-woo. And finally, Bob Ross and Mr. Rogers. The US isn't the main story. Is the world actually doing better or worse? South Korean here. Their president is in trial for impeachment. Utter chaos politically. My dude, I've been trying to follow the craziness with that president, followed by the first acting president. Has the second acting president been up to anything other than having to deal with the plane crash tragedies? In the Netherlands, our local version of The Onion, De Speld, has sent a subpoena to the Minister of Asylum and Immigration, explaining that, in summary, her idiotic behavior is making it difficult for readers to distinguish satire and factual reporting, and this means that the government is in unlawful competition with a private enterprise. I mean, this is hilarious to me. I'm American, and lately I wonder if The Onion should do the same thing. The real stuff that's happening is genuinely more unserious and unsatirical than anything The Onion could even make up. Isle of Man here. One of our local bars just won a local award, and the Women's Institute has launched a new jam, so that's nice. Wait, Women's Institute on the Isle of Man? What's going on? Ecuadorian here. We just had our presidential elections, which ended up in a tie between two of the 16 candidates. So we now have 2 more months of lovely suspense until the next election round. Yay. I say suspense because in my mind they're both as bad as the other, but in the different fun ways. So yeah, crime is still criming, health services aren't working as they should, lots of unemployment and underemployment, corruption at each level of the state, you know, business as usual. But hey, at least the weather is nice right now while I'm typing this, and the land is fertile and productive, so that's good. Rio is so hot that at 3 a.m. everyone is at the beach. New Zealand feels a little grim. Cost of living hurts, and currently the state of the job market and unemployment is really depressing. Oh, I frickin' love this. I wish there was a daily summary for each country around the world. This used to be what the news was. That used to be my favorite part of the 10 o'clock news as a kid, when they did World Roundup. Now it's all celebrities, TikTok clips, and people hating each other. Honestly, it feels like the narrator's daily news blast is just mostly the US these days. I don't live there. I don't like reading about the terrible Tangerine and his tango line of tragic topics. I live in a freezing part of the world where people don't talk to each other. We have our own problems. In the Philippines, Vice President Sara Duterte got impeached by lower Congress by overwhelming majority, like 200 or more representatives voting to impeach her. Her impeachment trials will begin after the election. She's been impeached due to A. threatening to end the president and his family, B. a misuse of public funds, C. instigating a coup d'etat, and D. treason. Additionally, President Bongbong Marcos finally declares a political war against the Duterte this election. Currently, most of the Marcos lineup has a big chance of winning the congressional election. If they get the majority, they can kick Sara out of the office permanently. They also have no issue with the opposition because the opposition also hates the Dutertes. I know exactly 3 names in regards to Filipino politics: Ferdinand Marcos, Imelda Marcos, and Rodrigo Duterte, so seeing the names Sara Duterte and Bongbong Marcos in reference to the current leadership was kinda surreal. But it's almost grimly comforting to know other countries are also stuck in their cults of personality and veneration of the familiar over progress. I frickin' love this. I wish there were a daily summary for each country around the world. Portugal here. We haven't had a political scandal in almost 48 hours, so I'd say we're doing pretty good. Oh, update. Sorry guys, another scandal. It was good while it lasted. Romania here. We're trying to explain to the population that a guy worshipping World War II Third Reich leadership is not fit to be president. He also believes H2O is not water and potatoes block toxic emotions. And somehow, we're not winning the argument. Sudan is suffering from the world's largest displacement rate from a war driven by foreign interests. We're talking the United Arab Emirates here. Hopefully it gets better one day so I can return home. The airport is non-existent now, so most people, including my family, had to flee to neighboring countries on tight buses with no air conditioning for more than 48 hours. All this happened overnight without warning. My husband's mother was trapped for months when it began. Their extended family is still there, and current information about their welfare is scarce. So many people are suffering, yet international attention is low. Kudos to the guy at the Super Bowl for holding up a flag to draw awareness. Here in southeastern Brazil, we're dealing with absurd levels of heat combined with huge floodings. It honestly makes me feel like humanity doesn't have long left. I don't even remember the last time I wore a long sleeve. Do you also have the feeling that nobody talks about it? In Parana, we've been living in a constant heatwave since September, and everyone acts like it's totally normal that we only had 2 days below 20 degrees last year. We've got a government with pretty okay plans, and it only took them 236 days this time. Greetings from Belgium. Well, it's grey in the UK, so same as usual. After flying back to the UK, I got to my hotel in London, turned on the TV, and I crap you not, the weather guy said, "Well, it's going to be another miserable day tomorrow. Welcome to England, I guess." From Japan here, struggling to cope with the rising prices left and right. Can't ignore US happenings even from here due to its effects on local politics. Also Japan here. Many parts of the north and northwestern regions are literally buried under nearly 3 meters of snow after a week-long blizzard reaching nearly the entire length of the country. Accumulations have been so severe that snow falling from roofs has killed a dozen people, and many structures have collapsed from the weight. Patrons at an inn in the mountains of Fukushima, far from the nuclear plant zone, relax people, well, they were stranded because of snow cover and had to be evacuated by helicopter. Scotland. It's February, so it's cold and grey. There's not much going on in my part of the country, so it's somewhat peaceful. I can't reply to everyone, but I'm glad you're all interested in Scotland. I hope you all make it here one day. You'll receive a warm welcome. The only unwelcome people are the MAGA Americans because of the damage the MAGA leader did to our environment building his golf resort, and his general attitude to us as a people. Denmark. Aside from Agent Orange threatening Greenland, things are great. The economy's booming, unemployment is low, and the workers just won great concessions at the latest round of negotiations. We haven't been plagued by the gang violence to the same degree as Sweden, and the Russian threat is somewhat more distant to what our Baltic neighbors deal with. To be honest, it's not bad. Not bad at all. Nepal. Political dysfunction continues. The youth leave in droves to other countries in search of greener pastures. In many parts of Nepal, only the very young and elderly are left. Positive, the mayor of the largest city and capital, Kathmandu, has launched a bunch of infrastructure projects. He's also a rapper. Balin Shah is his name. The country is still beautiful and worth a visit. Poland here. It's cold and grey, but apart from that, it's pretty alright, as long as you ignore media and the endless squabbling of politicians. It's always interesting to see poll results where one question is the situation in the country good, bad, getting worse, improving? And then the next one is your life good, bad, getting worse, or improving? Invariably, the majority of people think that the country is going to hell, but somehow the same majority thinks that their lives are actually pretty good. Malta here. All good. Taxes still low, country is safe. Weather is good. All good. I'm in China, though not Chinese. There are some economic concerns, but my life goes on as normal. Generally fine, though after reading the book for 2 weeks, a student wanted to confirm that hobbits aren't real. She's 13. Well, an adult woman in Singapore asked me if the purge was real in the USA. I'm not even joking. Honestly, there's a lot of people there who genuinely seem to want it to be a thing and are actively preparing for it. Sorry, I'm talking about that country that must not be named again. Back to the rest of the world. Canada here. Very difficult to afford life right now. I make way more than my parents ever made and can only afford maybe a quarter of what they were able to get off a single income and 3 kids. Phone bills are expensive, internet, car insurance, gas, electric bill, gas bill, food. I really don't like this way of living. Same. I'm making more than either of my parents ever did, and I'm single, no dependents, rent a home, and I'm drowning in debt. Something's gotta give for us soon. Hang in there. The fact that platforms like this are shared by so many nations makes me question popular political posts. Politicians will always act like that, so we go against each other, which happened here in the Balkans a lot. You can see people arguing with each other over whose life is worth more, which is disgusting. We should all live in peace. Parts of Brazil are suffering from a heat wave reaching 40 degrees Celsius. Also, coffee prices have skyrocketed last month due to severe weather impacting our crops. Canada here, and can I just say, frick me. Also, we're supposed to get a huge snowstorm today here in Toronto. We'll see. Well, it's minus 42 degrees Celsius in my neck of the woods today. I'm glad I'm warm and have shelter. Hope the animals are okay and the homeless find warmth. Later that night, I held an atlas in my lap, ran my finger across the whole world and whispered, "Where does it hurt?" It answered, "Everywhere, everywhere, everywhere." Warsan Shire. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Serbia has beautiful student protests which might topple the dictatorship. Officially, they're demanding that democratic institutions do their job, which they haven't done in years, and they refuse to negotiate with the dictator because he has no official authority on any of the issues. So, still rough, but a little hopeful after a decade of terror. Greetings from Mexico. It's extremely hot. We're making memes because of the whole Gulf of America fiasco. We have crappy candidates here in the Philippines because the vice president is being impeached, people there got frickin' insane and are willing to vote a frickin' cult leader, let me repeat, a frickin' cult leader, because it's an ally of that impeached vice president. I don't want to go back to my hometown because holy crap. Another context is that my hometown governor was one of those who signed for the VP impeachment. I'm tired of seeing golf maps on my social media feed, but apart from that it's all good here in Mongolia, just getting ready for a wrestling match with my mate Batsarig. These comments are not making me feel any better about the state of the world. In Finland, the weather is warm around 0 degrees Celsius. The government seems inept, but that's usual. It is clear they're hindered by the basics, right-wing nutjob party and government who are by and large very stupid people. New video from the Defense Forces on YouTube a couple of weeks ago, those are always nice. It was also great to hear of the flying Claymore drone we have now. Some of the foodstuffs in the supermarket are pretty high in price, like chocolate, but the regular stuff isn't too expensive. Can still afford eggs. Electricity is dirt cheap. Luckily we as a nation don't really use gas, because that's stupid. Internet and phone is also cheap as F. District heating in the town I live in is cheap. In Sweden, there are rising tensions being so close to Russia and things. However, last year they managed to take out a massive crime organization. All of the top dogs got arrested. That would be a good thing, but now all of the wannabe criminals are now aiming to make a name for themselves. So, crime in absolutes is down, but way more noticeable as people keep shooting and bombing each other. Racism is way up, which is not great as the population is old and dying at the moment. Otherwise, it's not bad. Still a beautiful nature, the people are pleasant if you put in the effort to speak the language. There's definitely a sense of cohesion. All in all, could be better, could be worse. Paris just jacked up the metro prices again. Privatization is a blight. Well, you French will surely revolt if the prices go up too much. I do love that about the French. You don't take much crap without a protest, do you? Heading into an election period in Uganda. I'm sure the president won't change. Widespread political apathy, this includes me, means that many find it useless to even go and vote. I'll be voting mainly for local government leaders and parliamentarians, but the presidency seems to be set in stone. I'm writing this from Italy, where we've officially entered the Second Medieval Age. The roads? Cobbled. The bureaucracy? More complex than a Renaissance painting. The Wi-Fi? Only slightly faster than a messenger pigeon from 1452. We have politicians fighting like rival city-states, rent prices that make you consider joining a monastery, and weather that can't decide if we're in the Alps or the Sahara. But don't worry, we still have espresso, pasta, and the unwavering ability to argue about whether pineapple on pizza is a crime against humanity. Overall, morale is high, taxes are higher, and the Vatican still hasn't replied to my request for divine intervention. So yeah, Italy's doing just fine. Australian here. Can't complain. I mean, I try to, but nobody will listen. Had some floods, which was boring, but the sun's out now. Turkey is going to the dogs. Our currency is practically valueless. The people of the country have also been molded into bad condition. Nobody trusts anyone. Everyone assumes everyone else is evil or a scammer. Watching the country news sucks because there's nothing that you find in them except the news of dumb inflation or some murder or bad incident. Australia checking in. It's summer and a heatwave, but I think it's been pretty good as far as no bushfires go. Otherwise, we're gearing up for an election and waiting for inflation to chill the F out. Probably should have said this earlier, but a lot of these answers are from early last year. It takes a while for these Reddit posts to accumulate enough answers for us to notice them and start making videos. So this is a bit of a time capsule, but it's been pretty consistent with the shower of crap we've had since then, to be honest. Ireland here, not too bad. Cost of living's fairly high at the moment, and availability of affordable housing is scarce. I wouldn't like to be going to the bank nowadays for a mortgage. My eldest son is 25, and I can see him living at home for another few years. New Zealand here. We're currently run by a moronic former CEO who has absolutely no idea what he's doing and is regularly taken advantage of by his ministers. A man whose only goal in government is to be a kingmaker, though he's admittedly a good foreign minister when it comes to representing us on the world stage. He's also a libertarian butthole who dumps on the Te Pāti Māori for doing a haka during the swearing-in ceremony without running it by the Speaker of the House, only to attempt to drive a frickin' Land Rover up the stairs of Parliament without running that by anyone, let alone the Speaker, and he had to be stopped by his security who talked to him like a child who had climbed onto some shelves. That's just the basics, and we've still got the better part of 2 years before we can toss them to the curb, because we don't elect governments in this country, we just vote the current ones out. Chile here. Hottest summer in history. Climate change kicking our butts. In my opinion, the country is doing fine, but there are always problems and grifters taking advantage, so the fascists are climbing higher in the polls like everywhere else, which is a bummer. Well, the Kenyan president is abducting government critics while doing nothing to help the citizens. People are pushing on day by day, but are waiting for the next election to vote him out. We just had a school firearm tragedy for the second time in our history, and yesterday a suspected terror group planning an attack was arrested. Gang violence still going strong. Sounds like a lot of negatives, but it's better than it sounds. I mean, it's still bad, but it's better than it sounds. I really don't envy you Swedes in what you mentioned, but at least you get a Kendrick concert? Thailand is doing a lot for same-sex marriages, focusing on scam centers and doing a lot for the environment. Not bad. Also freeing hostages and returning them to their home countries. Oh, good for you guys. Let's go to Thailand, boys. So, what I've gathered after reading this thread is that no matter where you live, most governments or rich people suck and try to suck the life out of you and control you while hoarding their riches. After thousands of years, how are we, the common people, still allowing this to happen? At every point in human history, people have been convinced that the way things are now is how they always were and how they always will be. Yet there comes a time when the contradictions in society become overwhelming and things change. Not through magic, but through social struggle. Now it's our turn. Just remember this: a better world is possible. Students in Serbia have been protesting since late 2024, and the movement keeps growing. It all started with a tragedy. Part of Novi Sad's railway station collapsed, killing 15 people. When the government's response felt sketchy, students took to the streets demanding transparency and accountability. What began as outrage over one disaster turned into a massive anti-corruption movement. Now, students across more than 200 cities are calling for justice, better education funding, and dropping charges against arrested activists. The protests have even earned them a nomination for the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize. It's not just about one incident anymore. It's about fighting a system people feel has been failing them for years. Well, Belgium is doing pretty okay. Not well, but okay. Canadian here, things are fine. It's minus 30 right now, but it's a dry cold. Everyone seems a little on edge because of the Americans, but folks are showing their pride for our country in a way I've never seen before. Yeah, there's plenty of things to complain about, and I'm sure other Canadians in this group have already done so, but after years of butting heads with each other and being divided, we're standing together as Canadians, which is pretty great. There's camaraderie in the air. But at the same time, there's a profound sadness. Our best bud, who just so happens to have the most terrifying military in the history of humanity, is threatening our economic security and sovereignty, and many of us have made the difficult decision that we'll defend our land to the death if we have to. We also feel somewhat abandoned by our allies because the Europeans haven't voiced any support. I get it. They've got their own crap going on, but we helped them in 2 world wars, which they were an ocean away from us on. Even just a word of support from their leaders would be cool, like, "Hey America, Canada is our buddy. Stop threatening their sovereignty, huh? Vive le Canada." Laughs in British and gestures wildly. Reading through this post made me realize the source of all of our problems across the world right now is elite politicians and business executives. And an uneducated general public that's being distracted by the elite with bread and circuses, i.e. superficial appeasement. The general public of most nations, if not all, are being dumbed down and kept poor by that nation's elite so that they can be easily controlled. This greed by the elite is destroying our world and crippling the advancement of the human race. Ireland, trying to keep a low profile until Paddy's Day. P.S. You're all invited to the party. Malaysia here. It's the 15th day of Chinese New Year. Literally war right now with all the fireworks. Scotland here. It's bloody freezing. Colorado, US here, freezing as well. I wish you a hot drink, nice dinner, cozy blanket, and pet or person of your choice cuddled up next to you. We watched a teacher get fired. What was it that crossed the line? An English teacher in my high school accepted a better-paying job at a nearby college and decided to tell the school faculty so that they'd have ample time to replace him for the next school year. It was the end of March at the time. The school just ended up firing him on the spot and told him not to bother coming back after the day was over. It was really sad. He spent the rest of the day giving away things from his classroom to his students. I actually asked a friend, and the new job required him to leave the school a week earlier than school let out to start his new job, and that is why they fired him. But still, it was pretty crappy of the school. High school. 2 teachers used to do the nasty on the catwalk above the auditorium. One of the student techs went up there to change the light filters and caught them. The next day, the school erupted in controversy. I was in the class that the male teacher taught. Principal comes in all calm and collected, takes the teacher outside of the class, and the guidance counselor stays with us. A few moments later, the teacher walks in, takes a couple of items off of his desk, doesn't say a word, and walks out. Substitute walks in and is immediately bombarded with questions that he couldn't possibly answer. Being the substitute in these situations is definitely interesting. As a sub, I'm never told why I'm subbing. I'm only called and asked if I'm available for the date and time. So one day I was at a high school and it turns out that the lady for who I was substituting had come under investigation either the night before or that very morning for embezzling money from the town's art society. This was the front page headline of the newspaper that morning, but I don't read the newspaper, so this all went under my radar. By the time 3rd period had rolled around, every one of the kids knew about this and they wouldn't stop asking me about what she had done. Somehow they were convinced that there was no way that I couldn't know what was going on. This escalated to a point later in the day where I basically had to ask everyone to stop talking about the whole thing. I didn't know anything about the situation. She hadn't been proven guilty at the time. She no longer works for the school now. And they were pretty much destroying this poor woman's reputation behind her back. To all of my knowledge, she seemed like she was a good teacher, and some of the students were clearly confused and upset about the whole state of affairs. In an innocent until proven guilty society, I couldn't stomach the slander anymore. It kind of made me feel bad about the way I talked about some of my teachers in high school. In short, if you're a Redditor who's still in high school, your substitutes don't know a whole hell of a lot about why they're there. Surely other places will prepare their substitutes better than this. We already knew that being a temp was a rough load. Going into something like this is just a whole lot worse. Surprisingly, the French teacher who constantly showed films featuring lots of au naturel people, had us read comics with a lot of the exposed human form, and read from books that described equally undressed people, was finally fired when they found illegal pictures of a similar nature and illegal subject matter. The French teacher who immediately took over him lasted 4 months. She threw a brick at a student. I don't think I've actually had a normal French teacher. I can confirm, French teachers are never normal. My source is 12 years of French immersion in the Ontario public school system. Your school went through French teachers like Hogwarts churned through Defense Against the Dark Arts professors. Next up, Monsieur Moody and Madame Umbridge. A teacher at my high school was really close with the students, like following students on Instagram and Twitter kinda close. Nobody thought anything about it because that was just her personality, until we found out that she'd ended up doing the deed on school property. The student body didn't know about it until one day she wasn't there. She lost her job and her husband as well, with whom she had 3 kids. Everyone was shocked at first, but looking back, it was quite obvious something was going on. My former math teacher just straight up slapped someone who was made to stand up and face the wall at the back of the room. That person had then proceeded to make noises as if they were making sweet, sweet love to the wall, including little sighs and moans. Look, nobody liked this kid, and not only was the whole ordeal side-splittingly hilarious, but they restocked on the good chips at the canteen that day as well. Ah, high school. You had your days. I guess you can't fire Catholic nuns, but our sophomore English teacher absolutely lost it one day because of the class's complete indifference to her Greek mythology lessons. Only one person in the class did a half-hearted attempt at an extra credit assignment from the prior day, and that was the start of the breakdown for her. The good sister somewhat calmly asked that we pass our mythology textbooks to the front of the class, and then went on a seriously loud rant about us awful students while ripping the textbooks down the spine and flinging them out of an open window into the snow. We were all sitting there like dumbfounded angels when the principal, whose office was directly below the classroom, came charging into the room, assuming that the students were rioting because why else would books be raining down outside his office window? It took several moments before he recovered from the shock of seeing a nun continue on raving and tossing books out of the window. He escorted her out. We just sat there with low murmuring conversations until the next bell, not knowing what else to do. Never saw her again. Different teacher took over the next day. The year that I threw up on a nun for refusing to let me go to the bathroom was the last year that she taught. She actually pulled my brother out of class and screamed at him for letting me blow chunks on her. My 4th grade teacher was fired because someone did a poo on the floor of the boys' room, and he thought that he'd get to the bottom of it by lining up all of the boys and sniffing their rear ends. I was in 5th grade social studies when my teacher had a small break with reality caused by PTSD from serving some years prior. A kid was playing with the chalkboard erasers at the back of the classroom and clapped them together hard. It sounded like a shot, and the teacher thought so too apparently. He quickly jumped over his desk and hit the floor, screaming at the students to run before we all got hit. He then threw a stapler as if it were a grenade and screamed for about 10 seconds straight. It took 3 school resource officers to get this guy to snap back to reality. Needless to say, he got fired after a few days' leave. It sucks, as it really wasn't his fault. Well, I didn't watch it happen, but it was clear to my Portuguese class that my teacher was being watched. They had the administrators of the department sit in on a few classes, and the day she was fired, 2 of my classmates were in the office waiting to talk to her, and it wasn't pretty. They didn't really have any real grounds to fire her. They didn't like her new teaching methods and suggestions for updating the department, and told her that she didn't fit in with the staff. She was an awesome professor, one of the only ones who genuinely cared about her students' well-being. She rewarded effort more than accuracy, and required students to go to office hours for homework checks rather than waste class time. After she was fired, many of us wrote letters on her behalf, as many of us wouldn't have continued to higher-level classes without her. My professor basically told her colleagues to F off, and she gave pretty much everyone an A that semester. She supported our protests, but also told us to stand up for what we believe is right and recognize when your efforts won't change or help anything. I was an office runner for my last period, and I witnessed my English teacher get fired. It was awkward as heck because she was a complete cow to me, and I had to pretend like I didn't know what was going on while I picked up homework. When I was 10, I was in a class with 36 kids. It was way too much, and all of us were pretty horrible, but one kid was the worst. He threw up in the drawer of the teacher's desk because he thought it was fun, for example. When there was a 1-minute silence for something serious, he wouldn't stop laughing. One day, he just wouldn't stop yelling. He sat next to the door that was half open. After some time, the teacher walks towards him, grabs the boy's chair that he's sitting on, and throws boy and chair through the half-open door. Another teacher was in the hallway and saw it, and our teacher was sent home. He didn't come back. Yeah, that's one of those things, isn't it? Yes, it wasn't good that a teacher did that, and yes, they should have been fired for it. But you know, I kinda get where he was coming from too. Not that this is a competition, but if it was, I think I'd win, because one of my music teachers in high school mailed a raccoon's head to his boss. I don't recall why he did it, but he was fired nonetheless. I'm just imagining a middle-aged guy stumbling outside in the middle of the night with a rifle and muttering to himself, "I need to find something with a head and remove it. Put that crap in a box. Yeah, that'll show him." Didn't actually witness it, but a teacher was manipulated into a fight with a student at my high school. It was the student's fault, but the teacher was let go anyway. As much as the situation sucked, many people were disappointed with how the local papers handled it, mostly because his surname was Shots. Headline could easily have been Shots Fired. Instead, they went with a boring title. At one point, my high school had a history teacher with quite the eccentric personality. She had the capacity to behave in an elegant, intelligent, charming way when she felt like it. Unfortunately, she was also a long-time alcoholic with a marriage that was falling apart. When she drank, she cursed like a sailor, had absolutely no filter, and generally acted like a deranged person. I'd witnessed her terrible behavior numerous times as she was actually a family friend and lived in my neighborhood. One day she showed up at my high school hammered, having driven the 1 mile between the neighborhood where we both live and my high school. She had her German Shepherd following close behind on foot. I didn't witness the entire event, but she apparently made a huge scene in the cafeteria, ranting and raving about who knows what. Eventually, she went so far as to grab a student and kiss him on the face. I believe that was the point at which she was escorted from the school grounds. If I recall correctly, she never returned to teaching. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I'm a high school teacher. Earlier this year, our faculty hired a new calculus teacher. My wife, as she does with every person she meets, looked his name up on Google as soon as she heard it, usually to find people's Facebook and LinkedIn. The very first result was an entire website dedicated to exposing him as a creep. We were pretty sure it was him because he had an unusual name, but we wanted to be positive. Of course, I looked a bit deeper before telling anyone, and sure enough, I found a formal letter of complaint that he'd sent to parents at his last school, objecting to his dismissal from the job and complaining that he was no longer allowed on school grounds because he was, quote, a danger to the students. I shared the evidence I had with our principal and asked that she don't let it be traced back to me. I felt a little good about myself. Justice was going to happen, and I'd helped protect the kids. Or not. The next day, the principal called me back into her office and said, "We took care of it." "Oh, you fired him?" I asked. Turns out she hadn't. Instead, they'd talked to him and made him promise that he wouldn't behave inappropriately, and then washed their hands of the whole matter. When I objected and complained, I finally got the real reason. Look, calculus teachers are really hard to find. They promised to put an assistant in his class at all times, but that policy lasted less than a week. He did in the end get fired, though. As time went on, he proved himself completely insane. He'd walk into other teachers' classes and yell at them to keep quiet while he was teaching next door. His class average was about 30%. He kept having delusions that he'd been assigned to spearhead projects that didn't really exist. Not even any of that got him fired. In the end, he defied the principal's instructions and reported everything to the school board instead of her. The whole highly inappropriate around kids thing hadn't worried her too much, but after that, he was gone. In short, apparently being a disgusting creep is no reason to lose your job, but if you disrespect the principal, you've gotta go. I saw our football coach lead a prayer at a pep rally and get fired shortly thereafter. He'd done it before and had been directed not to do it again. The last time, he made it a point that he was told not to do so before he began. He said that he'd been told he couldn't lead a prayer, but if he did, it would sound like this. History teacher got fired because she jokingly said her favorite song was "I Don't F With You." Obviously, she didn't say the actual swear word, but they still fired her. Nobody knew what happened until like a week later when she posted about it on Facebook. All we knew was from a small whiteboard she'd taped to her wall that said "Love you all" in her handwriting. Her replacement was that sub. Yeah, we all know the one I'm talking about. The one that took stuff way too literally. The one that hated everyone equally. The one that said to a class of kids that were misbehaving that she thought our school was a waste of taxpayer money. The one that bragged about having a frickin' quadruple masters. Is that even a thing? In history. Yeah, that's right, Miss May. I'm talking to you. Back in the 8th grade, a teacher at my school was fired for inappropriate conduct amongst students. Rumor had it that he was incredibly mean to his class, especially the girls. I never learned why. He also slapped someone in the hall, which I saw. It was quite brutal. He deserved to be fired. My ex grew up in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. One day, the entire sheriff department from 30 miles away showed up to the school parking lot, followed by dozens of sedans and men in suits. The kids were let out for all-school recess. The guys in suits went in and came out with their teacher, and all of them left. The guy had pulled a Donald Draper and had switched dog tags with a guy that died who was about to get out. He came back to the US and got a job far away from everyone. The real guy's family went looking for their loved one, and it took a few years before the government finally caught up with him. I mean, that's a pretty damn cool story, if you put aside the immense amount of extra grief he probably inflicted on that family. The stolen identity thing is hella intriguing, though. You know, I never witnessed the teacher getting fired, but I read about a substitute getting arrested and consequently fired. It all started, as so many things do, with Florida. But specifically in this case, it was the state making it harder to get prescription painkillers out of state that kicked things off. So her boyfriend went from oxy to dealing smack and got her hooked. To afford her habit, she and her boyfriend were caught robbing a bank. That got her fired, but then they found out she also stole a dozen or so MacBooks from the school too. I had a teacher get fired for telling a bunch of students to take pictures of themselves doing push-ups and other exercises in their jocks and hand them in with their essays for extra credit. Shortly after, one of the parents expressed their concern towards the principal about why they were taking pictures of students like this for a class, and the teacher was investigated and fired. This took place at an all-boys school, and the teacher taught economics. Why he didn't get caught earlier was beyond me. My favorite history teacher was let go because two schools in the area merged. Locations were separate, but it was now for different level students. This apparently meant that they had too many teachers. Because he was new, he was let go of. It's understandable they chose him over teachers who'd been working there for years, but kind of sad to see a great passionate teacher who could make almost anyone interested get laid off, while keeping teachers who did nothing to keep the lessons interesting. Mr. Buss, grade 9 social studies teacher. He'd just disappear from mid-class a lot. Sometimes he wouldn't even be there at all. He'd just randomly be a no-show. We later found out he had a passion for golf. He was a real jerk, and I never saw his reaction when he was let go, but I'm sure he made a stink because he had a very bad temper. My college anatomy professor was fired because he was going through all of the female students' personal information and getting their phone numbers. He'd call them and ask them out to dinner and stuff. I once saw a crazy, awful teacher get fired, mostly because of me. She was an English teacher, and rather than talk about the material, she'd spend her days talking about her day-to-day life and how she didn't have a belly button because she got lipo. She was so horridly overweight. In addition to just being an objectively bad teacher and not sticking to the material, and even choosing super easy books to read so she didn't have to put in much effort herself, she also had nasty little vendettas with students that she didn't like. One student, a friend of mine, was a little slow but certainly not stupid. He was eager to learn. Day after day for months, I'd watch her tear him a new one for asking what she thought were stupid questions. I literally watched this poor guy's self-esteem be stripped away until he couldn't spell the smallest words right. Finally, I got so mad that I stood up in the middle of one of her tirades and told her to stop being a fat, old, ugly witch who had to berate and diminish her students to get a self-esteem boost. She stood there, red-faced and speechless. I was a good student, so nobody expected that out of me. I grabbed my stuff and walked straight to the principal's office and told him about the previous few months. Surprisingly, over the course of that week, about 20 students backed up my story. I was in detention with her when they served her the pink slip. She bawled and babbled and actually had to be escorted out of the building by security. I won't say it felt nice to get the ball rolling on her termination, but that witch did it to herself. In short, I once got a highly incompetent teacher fired after I stood up for a friend that she was bullying. A teacher in my school poured holy water on a gay student's desk and then told him he had a demon inside of him and was going to hell. Hopefully, I'll see her fired shortly. Principal did the finger pistols thing at a teacher and got sent upstate. What the frick? Really? Over a frickin' finger pistol? Wow. Told a student to go play in traffic. Was pretty funny since the student was a little brat. Yeah, that's another one where I'm like, fair enough, but I get it. That's the kind of thing my teachers would jokingly say to us. Gotta say, there is some wild swinging here between firing good educators for one little inappropriate comment and letting them get away with absolute murder for months, if not years, when they should have been fired ages ago. Now for a story that I honestly hope is made up because it sounds insane. Alright, I went to a Catholic school, so a few teachers got fired, or I guess more accurately, forced to resign. I once had a lesbian midget music teacher, but due to the whole "no men for me" thing, she had to go. And the principal effed the dare cop and got caught. My religion teacher actually got fired because he slapped our math teacher for, quote, being a B-word, which sucked because he was right. I had to take a course for earth science my freshman year. The classroom was run by an emotionally unstable teacher who had difficulty controlling the unruly students. I was one of the good ones. Second semester rolls in and things turn for the worst. The head of the department lambasted her teaching skills in front of us. I'll never forget the day she began to break down in rolling tears in front of class, looking powerless and defeated. She begins to talk about her private life and how the loss of her children caused her to feel immensely miserable and sad. We were silent the whole time she spoke of it. A week later, she stopped showing up and blatantly lied to us about her whereabouts. We ended up finding out that she was fired and was stuck with a line of substitute teachers the rest of the year. I dug a little deeper a few years later and found out that she's doing much better. Back in the very late 90s, we had this absolutely crazy English teacher. She was telling 12 to 13-year-old kids outright that she believed there would be a battle between good and evil at the turn of the millennium, how the world would end, basically saying things that might F up a 12-year-old. Others told of her having breakdowns in lessons and having public and explosive fallings out with other English teachers, including a heated argument in a corridor. You just never saw that in schools between staff, so this was a rare event in itself. Basically, she was completely mental and her overall standard of teaching and professionalism was slipping fast. Nobody liked her. When the new millennium rolled around and the world hadn't ended, she was suddenly no longer at the school with no obvious reason why. Rumors were spread. One said that she had developed ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome. The official line was that she had unspecified problems with her eyes or some other medical ailment that kept her off work. I personally believe she either self-deleted over Christmas or was sacked. In the context of a private school, both are fairly seismic events, and we were never told the real reason. As far as I know, nobody ever managed to find out either. When a creep goes too far. The most unsettling stories women have told online. My friend and I were 16 and wandering around a Sephora in the mall, just swatching eyeshadow and highlighter on our wrists. He was the only guy in the store, and I only vaguely noticed him in the same aisle as us before we paid. It didn't ring any alarm bells for me whatsoever, because why should it? We picked up our highlighters and went to pay. The girl at the register rung up our items, leaned over, and said quietly, "That guy followed you two into the store and has been watching you in each aisle. I'm going to give you your bags and then go ask him if he needs any help. You two need to get as far away as possible. If you see him follow you outside of the store, go talk to security." She handed us our bags, gestured at the door, and walked up to him as we ran out. I hope she gets all of the good things in this life. A guy at my university followed me around for 15 years. I have a unique surname. There used to be a way for students to use Pine to find out who else was logged in and where on campus. He would use that command and show up in the computer lab and sit next to me. He looked me up in the phone book and showed up at my parents' house. After a restraining order, you'd think it was done, right? Wrong. I was speaking at an international conference in another country. Guess who was sitting at the front row? This was a conference for a very niche scientific field that he was definitely not part of. A few years later, I was at an alumni event with my husband. My husband left the table to go to the washroom. Guess who sat down the second he left? Police were called. It's been a few years since the last incident, but I am still paranoid. This started at a time when technology access was changing in the early 2000s. The most puzzling aspect of it is that we never dated and only knew each other because I was on the student council. His family was very rich, which made international travel to conferences I was speaking at in his budget. I know he has a Google alert for my name, so he in theory could just show up to another conference without me knowing about it. I let conference organizers know now, but it's not perfect. He can just use a different name to register. He also worked as a data architect at a company that I had an account with. I closed it just in case. I have to know where he is and where he's working because of his tendency to just look me up. Our laws just haven't caught up. So, first up, trigger warning. It's gonna be another one of those confrontational videos. I recently reflected with some of my girlmates that all of my dating horror stories are just kind of intense people, or at worst, just people who seem kind of lonely and who aren't in a good position to date, but my friends all had varying degrees of, well, this, without fail. This happened when I was a freshman in college. I was at the bus stop with a bag of groceries in each hand, just minding my own business, waiting for the bus to go home. Then an older man, must have been in his late 40s or early 50s, started approaching me and saying, well, really crude things. I should point out that I'm barely over 5 feet tall. This man towered over me and was at least twice my weight. I ignored him and didn't say a word. I don't even look in his direction. His comments start getting more aggressively gross and about my physical properties the closer he gets. I realize that the longer I stay quiet, the closer he's going to get. And when he was about an arm's length away, I decide to speak up. Now, what I want to do is explain that he's making me uncomfortable and I'd appreciate some space. But I must have been all out of patience because what actually came out was, "Can you back the F up away from me?" And oh my God. This grown man acted so outraged that I dared speak to him like that. He started screaming about how I should respect my elders, how I have no manners, and he actually throws a bottle at me. He misses. He goes on for maybe another 5 minutes berating me loudly until the bus arrives. Never went to that grocery store again after that encounter. From what my wife tells me, a lot of women are probably reading this question and thinking, "Oh, you mean today?" There was a guy in my hometown that would wait outside the high school with the door to his Corvette open, hoping that someone would get in. I lived in the middle of nowhere. To get to my house, I had to walk over a mile on a one-lane dirt road winding through a forest. One day as the school bus was approaching my laneway to drop me off, the Corvette guy was waiting in my laneway, with his door open. The bus driver wouldn't let me get off the bus. He continued to the next stop and told me to go to that house and call my parents to pick me up. This was in the days before cell phones existed. I unfortunately have a few stories, but this is one that tops the list. I'm a bartender, and one night I was serving 3 men who worked at an Italian restaurant nearby. I was offered a job, which I politely declined. They were my last patrons. I closed out their tab, finished my side work, and had a busboy walk me to my car. As the busboy left in his own car, this black Porsche SUV blocks me in my spot. The window is rolled down, and I realize it's the owner of the Italian restaurant. He asks if I want to go home with him. I decline. He asks if the busboy was my boyfriend, and I lied and said yes. He scoffed and sped off. I hurry and leave to head home. As I pull into the parking spot at my house, I see the same SUV drive by. I woke up my neighbor, who was a military guy, and he said he'd keep an eye out. That night I found the guy's name online, his Facebook profile, his business profile, his wife's profile, and his phone number. I took screenshots and sent them all to him, telling him not to bother me or I'll retaliate. And I never heard from him again. Lesson learned. Always pay attention to your surroundings while driving home. I was walking down the sidewalk and a guy whistled at me from his car. I ignored him and kept walking. He revved his engine loudly and ran his car up on the sidewalk, missing me by a couple of feet. I was younger than you'd probably like to think, by the way. While standing outside a bar, having a cigarette, a friend of a friend kept bugging me to go home with him. He'd tried this on multiple times, but it wasn't going to happen. Ever. I told him as much, and his response was, "Come on, if you do it with me tonight, I promise I won't even be racist and I'll make you toast afterwards." For context, we were both white. I guess he assumed I valued anti-racist attitudes and toast? Which is true, but weird sell, dude. I was 21 in a strange city and got separated from my friend at a bar. I was drunk and wanted to go back to the hotel. So as I'm leaving, this guy who'd been sitting near me all night followed and got in my cab with me and closed the door. Again, I was very drunk, so I had to think quickly and stay as calm as possible. He tried to talk to me and I just nodded and made small talk. I didn't know if rejection would make him turn violent, so I played along the best I could, after telling the driver where to take me. The whole time, this guy was moving closer and touching me, so as soon as the car stopped, I got out, ran into the hotel lobby where I knew this man would be following me, and screamed to the hotel security and desk employees, "I do not know this man. He is following me." And they took it from there. Seriously, if you're in this position, make a scene. There's no reason to feel embarrassed if you're seriously feeling threatened. Embarrassed is better than dead. I was walking my dog and made the mistake of not rushing home once it got dark. A man in a baseball cap and oversized jacket blocked my path to comment how pretty my dog was and how I must take good care of him. I smiled in a somewhat strained fashion and thanked him. Told him to have a good day and nodded and went to go around him. So he naturally grabbed my arm and said, "Yeah, I bet you take real good care of everything you have. You married?" I lied and said yes. He let me go but followed me home. I wound up calling my boyfriend to come pick me up. It would probably be the guy at the bar who pinned me against a wall and told me not going with him wasn't an option. On the plus side, I got to sprint into a cab, slam the door, and exclaim, "Just drive?" So that was cool. Ah, damn. I wish that phrase was used for a much cooler reason than a fearful one. A guy saw me in the metro and thought I was cute, which meant that he had to follow me on my 5-kilometer walk home to my flat in the middle of the night. He introduced himself to me as I was about to put the key into my door. To make all of you listening even more uncomfortable, let me iterate that there are a lot of stories I can't actually include here, either because the attempts on these women feature what we'll call disgusting and illegal generational differences, or other horrifying situations I'm not sure that this is the right platform to state the bare information on. When I was 18, my friend and I were driving home around 3 a.m. and we stopped by a gas station to get a snack. We hopped out of the car and immediately this guy nearby called out to me saying, "Brunette, white jacket!" He asks my name and I give him a fake one, and my friend and I go into the store. We decided to wait in there until he drove away, but 15 minutes later, he was still there. Eventually, he came into the store, looks around for us, and approaches me. The guy looked to be around 25 to 30. He smelled of cigarettes, and I backed up closer to my friend, but he took a step forward and proceeded to ask me for my number, saying I was cute. I lied to him and told him I was a minor, to which he respected and backed off. He then says, "Good to know, maybe next time," and leaves. We watched their car drive away and only leave about 5 minutes after we were sure he was gone. We left the store and got into the car. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I saw his car pulled over on the side of the road. We drove past it and I watched as the car turned on and started following us. I begged my friend to take the long way home because I didn't want to lead him to my house, and because the long way passes by a fire station that I would have gone into for help if they'd followed us that far. Eventually, we lose sight of the car and go home, and I never saw him or the car again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Weird Larry lived in my dorm. He unsuccessfully hit on all of the girls, which is why he was Weird Larry. It totally ruined his self-esteem. One night, Larry just showed up and invited himself into my room. I was not fully clothed. He took this as an invitation and climbed up into my bunk bed. I asked him to get down, and he asked me to come up there with him so that we could do it. When I refused, he took some quarters out of his pocket, put them on my nightstand and said, "What if I paid you? You could do your laundry." I told him that wasn't enough to do a full load of laundry, and he started crying and getting snot all over my pillow. I had to go wake up the RD, the person in charge of the dorm, and have him escorted out. And then he wouldn't stop sending me messages. They became more desperate, until they became threats of the unspeakable act. I saved the messages and used them to file a restraining order. A few other girls wanted in on it, so Weird Larry was evicted from his own dormitory and had to drop out of school. In short, came into my dorm room uninvited, then gave me some quarters and told me he was paying me for favors. Then he cried when I said no and wound up needing a restraining order. Made eye contact with a guy across the street, smiled at him to be polite, so he followed me home without me realizing it and spent the next few days stalking me, following me when I left the house and leaving notes on my front door. I had to get the cops involved. It's sad and infuriating. A random smile can literally brighten an entire day for someone. It's so wholesome and sweet, but for a person to take that and corrupt it into something so sinister and disgusting… When I delivered pizzas and I was 18, this one guy asked me if I wanted to step in while he grabbed his money. It was cold and rainy, so I took him up on the offer. He ended up trying to keep me there until his mum got home because he didn't have enough for the pizza. He tried to force me into a pyramid scheme and kept making me uncomfortable with comments about me. I'd left my phone in my car, so I couldn't text my manager to call me to give me an out, because no matter how hard I tried to leave, this guy would find some way to block my path. I took off when he went to the bathroom and told my manager about what happened. So, females weren't allowed to deliver to him anymore. We eventually found out he was a convicted unspeakable act offender too. Normally, I find an out and always have an escape plan. But I put myself in a position where I couldn't give myself an escape that day. I went on to manage and deliver pizzas for several years, but after that day I implemented a new rule which was never enter anyone's home unless I knew who it was. I'd stand in the pouring rain any day over entering a stranger's home. I come from a safe, low-crime area, but my gut instinct that night was that I was in danger. When I was younger, I went to Walmart with some of my siblings. I broke off to go look in the shoe section for some sandals, and as I turned a corner, I almost ran into this one guy. Very nondescript, wearing the jumper most guys who work at the plants near there wore. For some reason, I immediately got a really bad feeling. I panicked and turned around and went to the nearest other section. It took a few minutes to calm down enough to realize that it was the baby section and that I was staring at an infant bouncer for which I had no use. I laughed at myself and put it all down to how anxious and socially awkward I was, and then turned around to go back to the shoe section. I then realized that the guy was now in the baby section, and that bad feeling came back. What were the odds that he actually needed something there? I fled to the women's clothing section, thinking that there was no reason he'd appear there. I was shaking, pretending to look at things and telling myself that I was being ridiculous, when he came up behind me and grabbed my behind so hard there really couldn't be any mistaking his presence, and whispered something in my ear. He immediately walked away before I could do anything. I listen to those bad feelings now. Frankly, I consider myself extremely lucky. I also really wish I could remember what he said, but everything was kind of roaring and went blurry. I was so panicked. I smiled at a guy I passed in the park, as I do everyone I pass. He immediately turned around and followed me, but not before he began throttling the rooster with all of his equipment fully out of his shorts. Ugh. There was a guy at a show that was sitting behind me. Apparently he was quite brave when drunk, because he stuck his tongue in my frickin' ear. I whipped around so fast with my fist up that his buddy dragged him out of there. I don't think either one of them realized I was old enough to be his mother and had no qualms about retaliating. After the opening act, I went to the washroom and literally washed my ear with soap and spent the rest of the night with a paper towel in my hand to wipe every time I got the heebie-jeebies. But I think I taught the young girl next to me that you don't have to put up with any crap because she kept telling me how brave I was. Kinda makes an old lady feel like a hero. Yeah, honestly, well done for showing him it wasn't going to be tolerated. My goodness, these videos are not good for how I feel about my fellow man. I mean, we all know that these guys are a minority, but my god, some of us need to be better about calling them out and coming down on them. So last year I got a flat tire on a semi-busy road right when a snowstorm started. Since I had AAA, I figured I'd use one of my roadside assistants to have them replace the tire with a spare that I had, and I wouldn't have to go outside since I forgot gloves. While I was waiting, a mid-40s or early 50s man came up to my window and asked if I needed help. Thinking he was just a good Samaritan at the time, I thanked him but told him no, I was just waiting for AAA. Now, if he'd left it there, I would have a nice story about a guy willing to help me with a car problem. Instead, he gets downright pushy. He lives nearby. I can just take my car there and change it at his garage. Why don't I just stay in his house until AAA comes? I kept telling him no until he starts yelling and I rolled up the window and he starts pounding on it. Eventually he left when the AAA guy came, but I still took a very long and circuitous route home. Stay inside, lock the doors, and honk the horn like frick and they usually go away. I've worked nights all my life and the amount of men that will approach a lone woman in a car is scary. There was a thread about this kind of thing in my neighborhood recently. Some guy was driving around telling women who were in their cars alone to roll down their windows. Once they did, he'd tell them that it looked like their back tire was flat and that he was a mechanic. He'd then follow them as they pulled over onto a side street. The woman who wrote about it said that she realized what was going on because the guy wasn't wearing mechanic gloves and gave off bad vibes. So when he came over to her car, she kept the windows rolled up and he started yelling at her. She drove away, luckily, but when she posted about it, at least 10 other women confirmed that they had similar experiences. It's so frickin' awful that we aren't even safe to be alone in our cars by ourselves. Her tire wasn't flat, to be clear. Man sits in a seat across from me, spreads his legs and starts cranking himself through his pants, all the while staring straight in my eyes. I was getting ready to jump up and run out at the next stop. An older gentleman suddenly appeared and stood directly in front of me like a shield and stared the guy down. At the next stop, he pointed to the door and made him get off. I hope that I said thank you, but I was in shock. So thank you, dear man who protected me and made me feel safe. I talked to him for 2 minutes at a welcome/icebreaker game when university first started. A few months later, I decided to not go to university anymore and to move in with my parents. I hadn't seen this guy since the game. He then contacted not me, but the priest of our village. He told him that I had a special aura and he needed me around. He drove 2 hours to say that to my priest. Thank God the priest didn't like that and called me and offered to call the cops for me. It still haunts me how much he must have found of me online or researched to know where I live and that I was religious. I definitely didn't tell him that. It was really weird. And yes, our priest is indeed one of the good ones. 15-year-old me went shopping and felt a weird touch when I was browsing books. Didn't think anything of it, but then there was another touch. Turned around to see a grown man trying to touch me up in public in the middle of the day in a bookshop. I was so scared. I just stood there staring at him. Me now would have done it differently, I hope. Also, a guy approached me at the school gates, maybe when I was 14, and followed me down the roads, but finally left when I wouldn't get into his car. City living can be scary at times. A few years ago, I lived in a tiny condo right next to a few trails in San Diego. I was on a pretty strict running and hiking routine. One night it got faster than expected. A man who appeared to be about 6'3" and 200 pounds approached me as I was nearing the end of my hike. He told me, with a smirk on his face, to be careful, as there are many things that could hurt me when the sun goes down. The next day, as I'm exiting my back gate, he's standing there as if he's waiting for me. He introduced himself and admitted that he's been watching me for a while. I decided to pretend like I was grabbing something from my car and went back into my house. For the next few days, I see this guy circling my condo, looking in if the windows are open. He was always walking around day and night. I checked the Megan's Law website and, surprise, there he was. I decided to contact his parole officer, and he immediately returned my call and stated he could tell I fit his modus operandi and to use extreme caution. He said he'd do what he could to get him out of the neighborhood. After that call, I thankfully never saw him again. Used to work with this old man that would touch me all the time on my arm or my back. It's very hard for me to make a scene, although I wish I'd been direct with him. My solution was to shuffle away from him anytime he got close to me. It did seem to fix it, but he was kind of a jerk afterwards. Also, same job, I was kissed on the neck by another coworker very suddenly. This guy was not from the US, so I chalked it up to cultural differences, but I didn't view him the same way afterwards. There was this creepy hunched old man who used to come into a pub that I worked at. He used to say and do slightly weird things, and then one day he called one of the glass collectors fat. She was 16 at the time, and to apologize, he went to fist bump her, then grabbed her hand and put her fingers in his mouth. Is this the end of federal education in the US? What happens next? Well, at least we know where the money's going. It's going to fund the proposed tax cuts for the richest people in the country. They need $4 trillion. Gotta find it somewhere, and apparently we should all suffer as slaves to the wealthy. Lots of questions being asked that should have been asked and seriously considered before the election. Then maybe we wouldn't be in the spot we're in. Well, I think it all stinks. But it's not even his original ideas. The Republicans have hated it since Carter created it. Well, you might be exaggerating the sorts of jobs the Department of Education does. To give a rundown, it, to quote, runs grants and programs and makes sure all students are afforded equal opportunity regardless of race, creed, disability, etc. It makes sure all get an equal shot at education regardless of the economic wealth of their district. End quote. Does that sound remotely bad? You know what it doesn't do? Prescribe curriculum. That has always been at the state level. Thank you. Spot on. I used to work at the Department of Education during the Bush and Obama administrations, and Trump's misconceptions about the Education Department's actual powers is ridiculous. As you said, the vast majority of what ED does is reviewing grants, administering federal student aid, protecting students with disabilities per the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, and protecting civil rights. They don't write curriculums or have an office of woke claptrap. It seemed not so long ago that Trump was good with keeping ED going under McMahon as long as he could use her to change the nation's schools from within. However, someone must have finally explained to him that ED doesn't create curriculums or push the 1619 Project, nor does it have the office of trans propaganda that empowers school nurses to surgically and chemically change the gender of students without parental consent. Once Trump found out that none of his BS fantasies actually existed, nor flowed down from ED or Biden, he quickly decided to dismantle the whole thing. Trumpers have this weird thing going on where they think that schools are teaching people to hate the USA. They've long been building the narrative that colleges are bastions of liberal indoctrination. In reality, people just tend to develop more liberal beliefs once exposed to a variety of people and higher education. Well, one thing that'll keep happening after we fully dismantle education in this country is everyone typing loose for lose on their wild, grammatically incoherent Twitter posts. We can expect to see more bastardization of the typed English language. Yep, my god. The levels of debate I see on those weekdays where I log into X and just look with horror into the comment section are just a warning sign of why this department is likely needed. It's a power move. That way, only the wealthy can afford to pay for a good education. Think of university or college, but for all education, and to try removing the true history of the country and glorifying those who kiss his ring and demonize the countries that don't bow to him. Isn't it ironic how the same class of people who demonize loans for higher education are the ones getting a leg up to send their kids to private schools? They just don't want their perfect babies mixing with the rest of us riffraff. I think we'll see more vouchers or some other program that funnels kids into Christian schools. Check out Doug Wilson's terrifying New St. Andrews College and Associated Logos School in Moscow, Idaho. It's probably both a way to make money and a way to spread white Christian nationalism. Look at Wisconsin or Arizona. It's already happening. This is to publicly fund Jesus in schools. Covers homeschool online curriculum too. If your kid has any kind of disability, you're screwed. Private schools don't have to take them, just like charter. Those schools don't have unions. Teacher pay is half. States can lower hiring standards to save even more money. I'm currently not sure of everything the department currently handles. I will say it's astronomically messed up the higher education lending program. It runs grants and programs. It makes sure all students are afforded equal opportunity regardless of race, creed, disability, and stuff. It makes sure all get an equal shot at education regardless of the economic wealth of their district. Does that sound remotely bad to you? You know what the Department of Education doesn't do? Prescribe curriculum. That's always been at the state level. I have a very high-needs autistic child and I've been crying on and off all week. I'm so terrified of what's going to happen to her in this whole situation. See, you actually know what the ED does. It's not the main source of funding for rural schools, but it supports IDEA and special ed, and a bunch of college stuff and something with Title I. Students with disabilities will be hurt the worst, and it won't take long for the effects to be felt. My daughter has Down syndrome, and her IEP, or Individualized Educational Program, is everything. I don't know what we'll do without these accommodations. I literally can't afford college without government assistance. So I guess there goes my dream of actually getting a degree and trying to live a moderately okay life. We have people here in power who glorify ignorance and stupidity. I've never in my life been so ashamed to be American. It's not quite the same, but I'm enrolled through public service loan forgiveness, where if I teach for 10 years, my loans are forgiven. I've got 10 years to go. I fully expect this program will be ripped apart by Musk and Trump, which will tee me off to an extreme degree. Yeah, I'm so terrified. I'll have a surprise $190,000 debt sprung on me like 2 years from forgiveness. I'm middle-aged. My retirement will go from meager to screwed. I made a frickin' deal to work non-profit and forgo high-income jobs if I did this bullcrap, and now they're gonna frickin' frick me? I'd be breaking the rules of this forum if I expressed to you the fantasies of extreme justice I'd have if they frickin' frick me and my frickin' family. Holy frick! He already said it. He loves the poorly educated, and the poorly educated love him, unfortunately. History is written by the victors, so now kids will never learn any true history. Once the right wing privatizes all K-12 education, those without resources will stop sending their kids to school. Those kids will either do menial work for low wages or get into lots and lots of trouble, especially with such easy access to weapons. I don't think the wacko right has thought this through very carefully. It's a very sad time for this country, and the right is too blind to see what the harm is that's being done. I think they might have thought through it perfectly. If they're going to get rid of immigrants, then they need people to do the work that undocumented workers would do. As someone who currently works in education, I'm pretty worried. I worry for not just our schools, but many others. Any school that is a Title I school will lose all funding, and there are even publicly funded schools who receive Title I funding for students who need services. Programs such as AITA that help fund the backbone of school networks and internet services are also up for a complete revamp or even elimination, although this program was already being talked about for a change before Trump took office. This will put network refreshes in jeopardy. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, their funds will also be cut. All decisions will be left to the states or local governments, so schools will be run very differently from district to district. It's going to be an absolute crap show. As someone whose child needed special education, speech therapy, and an aide, I'm concerned about everyone like him. Private schools aren't required to accommodate everyone the same way public schools are. We're very lucky to be in California. I'm in multiple Facebook groups, and as it is, I see families all the time who move here from red states for better services. I guess it's only going to get worse from here. Unfortunately, people with disabilities don't usually have a large lobby or influence, and always seem to be the first in line to have funding cut. Oh man, I'm gonna sell so many anti-woke magic crystals. Salt crystals made from the dried tears of California liberals. Come get 'em, folks. The plan is to dismantle everything, so I don't know. It all feels terrible. It's kind of funny watching a bunch of conservatives celebrate, knowing that within a year or two they're going to be panicking and blaming Democrats nonsensically for the bad consequences of this. Also, there's no justifiable position that a federal government of a sovereign nation shouldn't have a Department of Education. Getting rid of it is clown crap. Amid all of the very correct, very concerning talk about how this is going to hurt our educational system itself, I haven't seen anyone mentioning this. Without the Department of Ed, every federal student loan gets turned over to a predatory private lender. You think you're getting your loan forgiven if you work in a low-income school or hospital? You think you're keeping the fixed rate you agreed to? Huh, think again. After 4 generations of teachers and administrators in my family, I can tell you the following. 1. The system isn't broken, it just needs help. We have generations of amazing teachers and administrators of school districts, and no one's asking them what they need. And 2, you cannot run schools like a business. You can implement some of those factors, but it just doesn't respond like a business would. I promise you, Trump's plan will hurt 80% of the population greatly, and it will divide the classes in a significant way. There is zero chance it will improve education for all. So I should say it's very hard for someone outside the US workings of government to say how much damage was done by Doge before the 2 people running it had their big tiff, and these answers were mostly written about a month ago. And while it seems like programs like PSLF are for the time being still there as far as I can tell, that doesn't mean they aren't on the chopping block for later. If some of these specific things didn't come to pass in that first sweep, it doesn't mean they aren't still in danger. Stupid people vote Republican. It's in their playbook. I love the poorly educated, said their cult leader. I mean, does he have plans? So far, I've seen no semblance of a plan on anything. He just does crap regardless of the consequences. Eliminating the Department of Education and pulling the federal government out of public education is one of the central pillars of Project 2025. That's their whole playbook. We'll go back to 1979. The Department of Education created the horrible student debt situation we have now by guaranteeing student loans with noble intentions, which incentivized colleges to charge increasingly ludicrous tuitions as there was zero risk involved with accepting anyone. That's why we have state colleges with lazy rivers and other stuff that's basically daycare for young adults these days. Colleges now sell an experience, not a degree. You ever wonder why your dad said he could work a summer and have enough for fall classes? That's why. Because he could back then. Government created a problem that they then had to solve. They have no role over the curriculum anyway, and they've certainly not done anything to address the increasing drop of literacy rates amongst adults from the 2010s onwards. Nothing of value will be lost. Most of the states already have programs that are superior to Pell Grants for high achievers. I'm terrified for my daughter with an IEP who goes to special education classes daily. Going to this class has immensely improved the quality of her school experience and education, and it's been possible because of public school and the IDEA program. I can't afford to give her the same type of education privately. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? That motherfricker better not take away my Pell Grant and FAFSA. I think we need to come to grips with the fact that it's gone. Elon and Republicans hate higher education, except for themselves, and hate the idea of the government helping some gross poor person with it. They want it to be like when America was great and only the rich white men's rich white sons went to college. Only they deserve higher paying careers and getting to become bosses and CEOs. The rest of us need to remember our place in servitude to the rich. No idea how my daughter will finish college, and my junior and high school son's college dreams are crushed. For all of those that just say, go learn a trade, you can make 6 figures in plumbing or welding. Yeah, first of all, most don't actually make that much. Second of all, with millions of kids now not able to afford college, those trades are going to be flooded in the coming years. So no, those trade workers are going to become dime a dozen, and those jobs are not going to pay that much anymore because of it. And finally, I wish these rich morons would understand an educated society benefits everyone. All first world countries know and understand this. Well, we used to anyway. An educated society is healthier, cleaner, and has far less crime. It makes for a much better country to live in. When a proper education and higher education is only given to the wealthy, then you end up with a very, very wide class divide and you end up more like a third world country. This is the reason why those without kids or those whose kids have long since moved out still pay school taxes. Because you definitely don't want to live in a town where the population around you isn't educated. And society also benefits from having doctors, lawyers, engineers, architects, medical researchers, veterinarians and stuff, just as much as we benefit from those trade workers. I think people that want to see it ended are morons who believe the Department of Education sets the curriculum and don't realize it's states and local government who do that. Guess he's going for Make America Ignorant Again campaign strategy. Nah, that already happened. They voted him in. I work in education in a poor area that relies on title funding. I am not happy about this. The uneducated tend to vote conservative while being too confidently incorrect to ever have a hope of changing their opinions. This is why the propaganda wing of the GOP has been screaming about the ivory tower elites for the past 30 years. It's also why anti-vax idiocy has been on the rise. Naturally, they want to get rid of the Department of Education. They love the poorly educated. It is a bureaucracy, but it's well worth keeping. It's an important source of data which needs to flow in order to know what works and what doesn't. It's a department which helps maintain a level of fairness for the otherwise disenfranchised, the disabled, and the homeless too. I'm a teacher in a Title I school, so it would be bad news for my students who are all black or brown, because of course Trump and Musk want to screw them. I'm uninformed and don't know what this means for schools. Would this give more or less power to districts, counties, and states versus the federal government? Less funding, less standardized teachings, and more diverse and specialized educations? For a post about education, these comments aren't very educating. Please, don't hate on me, just answer. Schools will lose a lot more lawsuits. And poor, especially rural schools, will lose a ton of technology funding. It's so frickin' easy for any special ed family to sue a school for comp ed and win. It's insane how often judges simply side with parents whose schools bend over backwards, over and over in every way to support the kid. Then they hire an independent psychiatrist to tack on an additional disability on top of the 3 others they have, but since the school only got the 3, they now owe the family money for every single day of school from the time that kid was 8. The Federal Department of Education sets rules and guidelines that help schools stay in compliance and minimize some of these lawsuits. They also run the E-rate program. Money that schools get to help fund technology, cheaper internet, firewalls, running fiber and Cat6, wireless access points, hotspots, all for cheap. Way cheaper if your school is poor. Even more cheap if you're rural and poor. Some of the worst get 90% reimbursement if you do all the paperwork. All of that infrastructure is managed by the Federal Department of Education that sets the guidelines, funding rules, companies that can service you to guarantee they'll comply with the rules, a bunch of stuff. Get rid of the DO-Ed and the poorest and rural schools are so screwed you can't even imagine it. The feds don't set curriculum. It's the stupidest conservative talking point you can imagine, other than trying to shut down the other DOE, Department of Energy, which safeguards our nuclear weapons and doesn't actually tell us to use low-flow showerheads. Well, thank you for the grim summary. I know I've certainly learned a lot today. I honestly thought education was more or less a federal affair in the States, but it's shocking that apparently so many people who actually live there, like you Americans, think that too. So schools could get sued into oblivion, and education takes a nosedive as quality teachers can't really afford to do the job anymore. Cool. Cool. The GOP has made a concerted effort over the past 50 years to keep education from getting better because the smarter people are, the less likely they're going to fall into the trap of buying the bullcrap they have to offer. The dumber your followers are, the less likely they are to question what you say, what you believe, and what you do. They'll blindly follow you as a savior who'll do what's necessary to make their lives better. So you can promise them anything, even if it means stripping them of their freedoms, in the name of giving them a better life, and they'll buy it hook, line, and sinker. Trump being in office again is a perfect example of this phenomena. By dismantling the Department of Education, this will give all of the conservative states the opportunity to completely control the narrative in public schools, stop kids from learning what they really should know, and introduce religious dogma into the classroom, thereby creating more uneducated, gullible followers. They don't want you to think. When you can think for yourself, you question the environment around you and never take things at face value. You seek out new knowledge, you investigate claims, and discover the truth. Education is the enemy of dogma and conservatism. I mean, look no further than J.D. Vance's 2021 speech to the National Conservative Conference on Higher Education. He said, "We have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country. The professors are the enemy." This is how fascists talk. This is what Pol Pot said in Cambodia before persecuting all of the educated people, then rounding them up and executing anyone who had any kind of degree, and in the end killing doctors, lawyers, and teachers. If this isn't alarming, I don't know what is. It's how authoritarians talk. Department of Education? America wasn't using that anyway. I say we let it be dismantled. I believe it was formed in the early 70s, and with an $80 billion budget a year, what do we have to show for it? A lousy educational system, college education that's way too costly. Man, there are so many comments showing that nobody actually knows what the Department of Education really does. Speaking as a former teacher, I've had no interaction with the Department of Education. Education is mostly run by the state. Schools are already frickin' awful, have been for years. When I was in high school, I graduated with people that could barely read or write. Their writing was basically text abbreviations. My daughter had to switch schools because the district she was in had children in their class throwing chairs when angry or literally dragging their butts on the floor because they had special treatment due to learning issues and it was easier to just ignore the troublemakers than engage. I'm not sure, but beyond heavy restructuring, it's already screwed. Have friends and family that are teachers and it's all a crap show. At best, you'll get teachers that will be burnt out in a few years because the administration has their thumbs up inside them, or teachers that are glorified babysitters. What do people think is going to happen when it's the local governments fully footing the bill? If they cut all of our federal programs, I'm never willingly paying taxes again. Our taxes predominantly go to war and administrative costs as is. I already hate that. I want public education, universal healthcare and mental healthcare, childcare costs covered, free higher education and stuff. If they cut what we currently have left of federal programs, schools, libraries, Social Security and Medicare, and the Postal Service mainly, I'm out. I don't care. Well, this is all part of the grand plan, to be honest, to dismantle the government until it fails critically. Then they'll use that as an excuse to privatize every part of it, selling off the broken pieces at a fire sale price based on the justification that they're not worth much because of how badly they all failed. The government then gives the companies a hefty bailout to help them get back running, and all of those sweet potential profits get made. Sure, a lot of people will suffer, many will even die, but the shareholders, those guys will be fine. Also worth talking about is why the Democrats are so annoying to them. They keep trying to destroy the government to start this plan, but the Democrats keep fixing it, which is why they put so much into Trump and are moving so quickly so that it doesn't happen again. They want to do so much damage in 4 years that the Democrats have no hope of fixing it when they take over, and then when they fail to fix it, they can be installed into power again and finish the job if it's not already finished. The Department of Education specifically is a threat because it allows the lower class, the disgusting, dirty commoners, to get an education and threaten the established elite. You remove their ability to get an education for free, and now only the wealthy can get it. The wealthy can maintain their private circles, while the commoners can do the menial garbage jobs that they never wanted to do. They can be kept ignorant, uneducated, and controlled. We're just going to have to rebuild everything that he wrecked when he's out of office. And once again, the Democrats will have to raise the taxes and pay the bills to cover the damage done by the GOP. And the myth of Republican fiscal responsibility will live on. Incidentally, the DOED might be the agency that finally stands up to Trump. Educators are highly organized on the national level, and they're not going down without a fight. Trump doesn't have the constitutional authority to shut down the DOED. He'll still try, of course, but teachers might well be the first to call a national strike. They said it was impossible. The next big scientific leap is closer than you think. Spinal cord repair using stem cell regenerative therapies and brain-spine interfaces, allowing the bypass of diseased or injured spinal cord sections to restore full bodily functions. As someone with MS, mostly in my spinal cord, this sounds sick, but I won't be getting my hopes up either. Parkinson's. They just published results of taking stem cells, turning them into neurons, and injecting them. They did a small amount just to see if the neurons survived, But not only did they survive, but some patients stopped getting worse and some had reduced tremors. The results are promising enough that it's believed it could end up being a cure. I mean, I know I'd love to get Michael J. Fox back. I really hope the next big one's an artificial pancreas. Type 1 is a bit crap. Regenerative teeth and regenerative gums. I had a gum graft last year and they had to extract tissue from the roof of my mouth for one tooth. But for the other teeth, they were able to use this product Caresis, which is derived from Atlantic cod skin. I'm part fishwoman now, but the product helps recruit my own gum cells and convert into living gum tissue over time. Wow, you're Aquamam. From personal experience as of late, I really hope it's curing or reversing stuff like dementia and Alzheimer's. There's a new treatment for Alzheimer's just got approved in the EU that slows progression of the disease by about 30%. To be honest, slowing progression sounds great until you remember that no one really gets diagnosed until there are defects severe enough to have a big impact on daily life. Not just, I had to remind Mum that she already washed those dishes, but, oh no, Mum gave her bank info to a scammer because she really believed he was Hugh Jackman, and also I think she hasn't washed the clothes she's wearing since the last time I saw her. That is the point at which I personally won't want to extend the remaining 7 years, which are the average after the diagnosis. My parents are close friends with a couple of medical doctors, and my girlfriend has diabetes type 1. The doctors keep claiming that there's a breakthrough in treatment of type 1 just around the corner, like 5 more years or something. On the other hand, in the type 1 subreddit, the "in 5 years there will be a cure" is a running joke because people have been telling that for about 40 years now, so I'm not very optimistic to be honest. Sorry, but I basically just included you in this video because you spelled diabetes the same way that Mac from Always Sunny says it. Type 2 adult onset diabetes? What does that mean for me, Doc? Repairing hearing loss through surgery and a refined gene therapy delivery method. Scientists at Harvard have been showcasing some pretty promising results for a while now. If they can cure tinnitus, they can have all my money. Astronomer here. Here's a wild one. We might have a new planet in our solar system, like a legit planet 4 times the mass of Earth, by the end of the year. Have you ever heard of Planet 9, the hypothetical planet out beyond Pluto? Finding it is really hard due to it being so well beyond all the other planets and being very faint. But last week I was at a talk by Mike Brown, the astronomer who proposed it, and also the guy who killed Pluto's status as a planet. In October, though, the Rubin Observatory is supposed to start operations, which is going to take images of the entire sky every night with an 8-meter telescope. According to Mike, if that turn-on actually happens in October, we should find Planet 9 by mid-December. Most likely thing is that start date slips a little bit, but how cool's that? The thing about it is, I've seen a lot of talks over the years about Planet 9. I think by now I'd say 75% think it's real. It's a lot of circumstantial over direct evidence, but it is statistically a weird signal. If we lived 5,000 years, we'd know if it's real or not. The trouble is if you want to learn the answer quickly. mRNA tech may give us cures to over a dozen illnesses, including several cancers, type 1 diabetes, and chronic gastric diseases, Crohn's specifically. Dude, I just want to know why I have endometriosis. They've actually been developing a blood test for diagnosing endometriosis in Australia. I saw articles about it earlier this year, showing really strong results and accuracy. It's not fully ready yet, but it's getting close, and I know it's not anywhere near a cure, but it definitely feels like a step forward. Though I absolutely 100% agree, those sorts of things should have been in development way sooner. But better late than never, I suppose. A new Lyme vaccine is in stage 3 trials, so it's still a bit off, but definitely closer than I think most people are aware. I am begging for it to be celiac disease. All I frickin' want is a Cinnabon, a beefy 5-layer burrito, and a cheese quesadilla with extra cheesy jalapeno sauce. I've told my husband that if I'm gonna die anyway, they'd better make sure the last thing I get to taste is a Cinnabon. I don't care if I'm on life support or in a coma, they'd better be stuffing that into my mouth. I want to taste it before I go. That being said, if I ever become terminally ill, I'm telling the doctors to dose me right up, and I'm eating every gluten-filled food I've missed. If I'm going out, I might as well eat good. Apologies to the janitors in the restrooms, though. The breakthrough is here, we're just not using it to its full capacity. Gene editing like CRISPR is completely revolutionary to the human race. Yes, but it also causes unwanted DNA damage randomly in other regions of the genome, which would likely contribute to cancer if used regularly in humans. Scientists don't normally spot these side modifications unless they sequence the whole genome and assemble the sequences into a contiguous map, before and after treatment. Better CRISPR proteins with fewer side modifications are being developed though. Genome sequencing and assembly is getting cheaper and easier too, particularly with nanopore sequencing. Then there are the ethical implications of human genetic engineering, like choosing your child's skin color. Biotech-based aging reversal. Scientists are already reprogramming cells to act younger, and early tests in animals show real promise. It's not full-on immortality, but slowing or even reversing aging at the cellular level is way closer than most people realize. Maybe decades instead of centuries. It's probably a pipe dream, but I've always loved the idea of living to be very old and frail. Then this technology coming through, getting hooked up to it, and feeling myself getting younger and stronger. When you're young and strong, you don't appreciate it. How could you? You don't know any differently. Your whole life has just been getting stronger and healthier. But you notice almost every day when you're on the other side of that curve. Which in fairness, I'm barely on, and things start to decay faster than anything. As Mark Twain said, "Youth is wasted on the young." But to have the other side of that, to really appreciate how effortlessly strong and limber you are, to feel and appreciate that is such a dream. With the state of things currently, I don't think we're far off from watering our plants with Brawndo. Electrolytes. It's got what plants crave. A new treatment for cat kidney disease. Kidney disease is a common cause of death in cats. A protein called AIM is being studied in Japan. AIM is getting closer to practical use. AIM will help cats live longer than they do now. My vet mentioned that kidney disease research is advancing. There's now a pain treatment med called Silencia that doesn't have the kidney-harming side effect of previous meds, so it can be given long-term. My 15-year-old girl gets monthly injections. I'd never have said she was in pain, but she's elderly, so we tried one shot, and the difference was remarkable. From nice but aloof cat to absolute cuddle kitten. Please let it be successful research and address of menopause, beyond 4 hours of MD teaching in med school. Not in the US, no grants of research if it even contains the word women. But as a 41-year-old woman, I frickin' wish. If we ever again get better space telescopes, we may improve methods of finding other life in the visible universe. Not to denigrate the recent announcement, I'm thinking of a discovery with more certainty. The rest of the world isn't necessarily hampered by the US admin putting brakes on NASA projects. Europe, India, and China are perfectly capable of advancing astronomical science. Michigan State University and Stanford University scientists have created a nanoparticle that eats away portions of plaques that cause heart attacks from the inside out. 5 years ago. Haven't seen an update since. I was hoping someone would say a cure for deafness, but I haven't heard anything. Full disclosure, this is self-depreciating humor as I'm quite deaf. Just avoiding the pitchforks here. Haha! Well, I probably would have just read it out aloud anyway and been roasted in the comments of the video. So hopefully you specifying that you're actually deaf will spare both of us the incoming mob action. The detection of primitive alien life. Just recently, a potential signal of biomarkers have been detected on an exoplanet. This is still very preliminary, but it might be the first signal of alien life. Even if the signal turns out to be false, chances are high that we detect something on another exoplanet with the current or upcoming generation of telescopes. In 5 years, the Europa Clipper will have reached Europa. I have high hopes. They've developed tattoo ink that can determine how high or low your blood sugar is by the color it turns. There's also 2 other types of tattoo inks for monitoring disease in the body, but I was most excited about the blood sugar one. Though it can't tell you your exact glucose count, it will still be enormously helpful for diabetics everywhere who have lifelong struggles with this illness. It's currently in the testing phase. For many who don't have severe symptoms associated with high or low blood sugar, it could replace glucose monitoring devices for life. Being able to diagnose multiple types of cancer in a few minutes waiting in the waiting room with a credit card-sized lab that can be used by doctors while you wait in the waiting room for results. Isn't Elizabeth Holmes in prison for this? Yes, because her company didn't provide accurate results from blood tests. They doctored the results. They committed fraud. That doesn't mean there isn't a need for more expedited testing and smaller labs. Scientists are continuing to work on the need for faster testing and miniaturizing labs, and there are real advances in the technology with the results being tested and peer-reviewed. There are entire journals dedicated to the lab-on-chip concept. How long do I have to wait for the biggest, most useful breakthrough of all? Not having to wait at a red light when I'm the only car at the intersection because the light will automatically turn green. Sorry, this already exists. The problem is the government where you live has cheaped out on roads. They can put magnetic sensors under the road that can detect a motor vehicle and let you straight through the intersection if it's empty. It's useful to optimize traffic flow. They've been widely available all over the world since the 1960s. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Talking to animals, especially whales and dolphins. I literally can't wait for this to be a thing. See the recent efforts to use LLMs to do this, or train LLMs with dolphin speech data. It's possible nothing much will come of it, but I also think it's possible we figure out they actually have history and culture and communicate in ways we can understand and relate to. Imagine if we could actually read up on scientists' reports where a given group of dolphins talks about this story they're passing from generation to generation that's about humans and how they interact with them and stuff, or whatever else is going on with them. I expect that would change quite a bit about how we see marine mammals. For those who can afford it, the future of medicine will look like magic to us in the way that the computer would look like magic to people from the 1700s. We may have to deal with our grandkids going to a shady shop in the mall and getting an off-brand genetic modification for a tail. Just like our grandparents hated tattoos, we'll hate horns. I'm currently working on a perfect margarita, and I think I've got it. CAR-T, or CAR T-cell therapy, which is a cure for cancer that shows near-perfect results. Basically, they sample your personal unique cancerous tissue, and with gene splicing, they can program the cancer to consume itself, the same way your body usually destroys flawed cell production on a daily basis. Just amazing. It cannot go mainstream soon enough. Vision repair, please. Astigmatism sucks. Having to wear glasses is not fun at all. Nuclear fusion. I mean, it's not so much closer than people think, but a major breakthrough that will literally change almost every aspect of human civilization once it really gets going, and it's a matter of when, not if. I'm not sure we're mature enough to benefit from it. The promise of fusion is endless, essentially free power. The reality is likely that the group who finally achieves it will patent it, commercialize it, and then raise the price for consumers after deploying marketing spin about how it's better than the energy that we're getting last year. Yep, I always hear it's 10 years away. 10 years away, and then 100 years later, it's still 10 years away. Skynet, better known by its brand name, Starlink. Male contraception. Why has nobody mentioned something to repair the environment? Something to have clean water or clean air? What am I not seeing or aware of? Oh, don't worry, we're working on making you live longer. The monkey's paw? It'll be in a dystopian polluted hellscape with no natural beauty. Personalized cancer treatment through CAR T-cell therapy. Amazing results in some cancers. A way to make microplastics disappear or disintegrate without any trace left. I really need it to be time travel so that I can zip out of this bullcrap. Oral bacteria that prevents cavities from ever forming. None of these responses make me feel good about the future. Powerful technology is only a good thing when it's in the hands of a responsible civilization, which we most definitely are not. So you're saying we need to stop all progress because you don't trust a generation or administration, or you just think humans are hopeless. Maybe there's a third option you'd care to add. I, for one, believe we go through ebbs and flows with popular sentiment and would rather we continue with this scientific tech trajectory. Not a cure, but cystic fibrosis. Crazy advancements for a terrible disease. I hope it's a cure for ME or chronic fatigue or long COVID. I hope pet allergies. I just want a cat. I work in the AI space. It's moving so quickly and being deployed throughout all industries at a rate that's unstoppable. We might not feel it quite yet, but we will very soon. In 5 years, I can't even imagine what things are going to look like. To be fair, as someone who also works in applied AI, there is a major adoption issue. This is something even Microsoft has found. It's that there's new models and services coming out every day, but customer adoption is really dragging a lot. LLMs are great fun, but frankly implementing them correctly is really challenging. Their probabilistic nature doesn't make them a direct substitute for everything that a human can do, or even small tasks, particularly from a risk and responsibility standpoint. Definitely one of those techs that in theory could be and is really useful if applied the right way. I just wish it wasn't using all of our RAM and power to make garbage slop art. My vote is for battery technology. It makes sense because there's been so much investment and the manufacturing ecosystem is already there. Battery tech will continue to soar for sure. Sydney, Australia already has so much solar that it's free from 11 through 2 p.m. They desperately want to store that free and clean sun energy. Electric vehicles benefit greatly from better batteries. V2G is a tech that combines these. CRISPR, to spell out its full name, clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats. It's a gene editing tool that allows scientists to modify DNA sequences in living organisms. It's based on a naturally occurring bacterial immune system, where bacteria uses CRISPR sequences to remember and destroy viral DNA. The CRISPR system uses a guide RNA, gRNA, and a Cas9 enzyme or other Cas proteins to target and cut DNA at specific locations, enabling scientists to delete, insert, or modify genes. All the big tech companies are pretty interested in messing around with our brains, like Neuralink and stuff. I think procedures where we can get chips to make us half robot, half humans will happen scarily quickly. There's a lot of things I'm excited for in the future, if we make it until then, but hackable objects that are in or a part of my body is not something I'd like to subject myself to. Well, they're going to broadcast unskippable ads into our brains and put things we like to experience behind paywalls. I'm sorry, your current Optic subscription doesn't include the ability to see women's chests. Would you like to upgrade for $12.99 per month? Vaccination for the vast majority of communicable diseases. Unfortunately, we've taken a very, very swift turn away from that whole nonsense right as we were close to touching the sun. Turning CO2 into protein. Look up Solar Foods and their product Soline. Eyesight restoration. I'd love a fix for multiple sclerosis. I haven't been able to function yesterday or today. Exhausted, pains, tummy troubles. I just need a break. Every day it's a different symptom, and God forbid I have a good day, I pay for it days afterwards. Sounds like they're getting close to at least minimizing the effects of Parkinson's disease. We have a vaccine for HPV, aka certain cancers. I suspect we'll see more data and research for other viral-based cancers that will lead us to reduce cancer rates significantly. I personally would like a means for reducing amygdala inflammation and prefrontal cortex lesions, but that's just me. Why is baldness so difficult to cure? We could have mostly renewable energy if we could rid ourselves of fossil fuels and the interests that are keeping them important. China is deploying a nuclear power facility worth of photovoltaics every day right now. If we all got on board, boy. The one that's already here that's blowing my mind is engineering proteins using AI. Most current AI stuff people hear about isn't actually very useful, but AlphaFold is incredible. For context, predicting how a protein should fold is incredibly hard. There's even a challenge that occurs every 2 years where participants compete to see who can get the most accurate prediction. Before AlphaFold, the best average score that teams were managing was around 40 out of 100 points in the competition, and that took monumental effort. A typical protein is estimated to have 1 to the power of 300 possible configurations, so even if you understand the physics behind protein folding, you still have to brute force those combinations, which just isn't possible with any computational power available today or perhaps ever. So while a lot of teams were using physics-based predictions, they couldn't brute force all possibilities, reducing their accuracy. Enter AlphaFold, an AI model trained on confirmed protein configurations. Version 1 entered the competition in 2018 and pulled off almost 60 out of 100, jumping way ahead of other human teams. Then it came back in 2020 and hit almost 90. Ever since then, basically all of the other top teams are using AlphaFold as part of their processes, with winners breaking into the 90s. In just a few years, the competition went from not ever seeing 50s to being in the 90s, and the competition has been held every 2 years since 1994. It completely changed the field and is an excellent case of AI actually being used in incredible ways that actually matter. And now there's even tools being developed which use AlphaFold as a base in order to generate new proteins for specific purposes. It's still not perfect, so there's lots of work to do, but the possibilities are incredible. From curing diseases to creating enzymes that can withstand harsher conditions for manufacturing purposes, to testing how medicines bind to different proteins, to possibilities we haven't even thought of yet. There are several changes occurring faster than people understand. First, oil is irrelevant. It's falling as a source of primary energy. Yes, natural gas has taken a large portion, but solar and wind are growing so fast that it will be a huge oversupply within a few years. And second, GLP-1 receptor agonists. Ozempic is showing promising results for a wide variety of problems including weight control, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and cardiovascular, just to name a few. Geothermal anywhere in the world is becoming a reality. Unlimited clean energy. It's also safer than fusion and cheaper than both nuclear and fusion, though it's only possible because geothermal is piggybacking on the tech from fusion. Fusion will come into its own for space exploration. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.